Yeah, this is the best one for
Thank
not
you.
talking glasses.
It seems weird that we're actually married.
Here you go.
Yeah. Seems weird.
I see all these guys drinking their Cokes. I saw a face mask on Facebook. It was made out of a pair of jeans. You could drink your sodas and water.
My mother-in-law, like I said, has been making all these. This poor Sarah has to wear one all.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock. Can you all hear me okay? Are we good, Dean? Are we good to go? Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for USD290. It is July 27th at 7 p.m. I'd like to call this board meeting to order. As we are broadcasting, streaming this, and I know visually it might be a little hard to see who we are, and we have these masks on. So for roll call, I will call your name, and please raise your hand to identify yourself and state present. Linda Alderman,
Present.
Chris Cunningham,
Present.
Julie Dandrio, present. Susan Moore,
Present?
Shanda Olmsted,
Present.
Melidia Payne,
Present.
Harold Wingert.
Present.
And for those that might not have been able to see, Harold is joining us via the computer over there next to Susan. So please stand now that we have 7 board members present and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes 7-0. And we are on to the consent agenda. There's not much on there this evening, Dr. Cobbs?
No, just want to make sure that everybody recognizes that the dental agreement that we have here is with a different company, but the same process. We're bound by law to make sure that all of our students are screened from a dental standpoint, just like we are for hearing and vision and so on and so forth. So this is a mandate that we have to meet from the state.
Thank you, Dr. Cobbs. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. And the consent agenda passes 7-0. We do have comments from the public tonight. Just a reminder that parents and taxpayers of USD 290 who desire to address the board on any topic may email in their comments. They are due by Friday before the meeting at noon. Comments that are received by that date are then vetted and verified to make sure that those who have submitted their name are actually those people. And we can thank Mr. Grell for completing this process for us. There are some comments that are here that were from the meeting before that didn't make that deadline, so I will go ahead and read those to start, and I'll read through all the comments. Just as a presenter that would come in, the board will listen to those comments. We will not respond. However, we may ask Dr. Cobbs to follow up as appropriate. So I will go ahead and start here. The first submission came in on the 13th of July by Jonathan Oberg. His comment is, I am concerned that we are asking parents to choose a mode of education 1 week from today when A, significant details about how to reopen have not been finalized or shared, and B, the state of the pandemic continues to be in flux. I would like to learn how we intend to keep students safe, whether we will be testing staff and students, whether there will be quarantine activities if students are exposed at school, okay, and how that will impact the learning process. I recognize there remain many unknowns and accept that in part decisions and answers will need to come as the year unfolds. At a time that the board meets remotely for public safety SD participation, I suggest the board also consider deferring decisions about mode of education and, if necessary, defer the first day of school. And that ends that comment. This submission came on July 22nd from Dawn and George Coopy. The comment is, we will be up to how comfortable every parent is. I know the school is going to go out of their way to make sure the kids are safe. Our concern as a family is to start in person and then have to switch to online in the fall, winter. I think that it is adding stress to our child that is not needed. We will be choosing to do the online school until, quote, the next wave, end quote, hits us, if that really is going to happen. I feel that our child will endure more emotional stress if we were to switch 100% online in the fall/winter as a USD290 unit. I want her to be acclimated to the online environment instead of switching all at once. I think as of right now, the first 9 weeks, we will be keeping her at home for online and go from there. I'm hoping that sports will not be an issue the further we move along with school and COVID. Thank you all for your efforts you are putting into making sure our children are safe and still able to attend school. And that is the end of that comment. The next comment came on July 22nd from Katie Thiessen. The comment is, parents should commit to a minimum of 9 weeks when enrolling their child for either in-person or virtual. It would be very difficult to handle transitions for both families and teachers. That is the end of that comment. This comment came July 22nd from Sarah Cunningham. The comment is, I am the parent of an elementary, middle, and high school student. I fully support Governor Kelly's executive orders for schools. Delaying school by 3 weeks will not impact our students like an opening of schools without proper planning. We open the doors without safety measures in place and all will be for nothing. Our numbers are steadily increasing each day in recent weeks with no end in sight. As school years begin, we always see a surge in viral illness. This year, the viral illness surge may be deadly for students, staff, and community. Our schools need to prepare for the next year, be trained on new equipment that will help them keep rooms clean, establish backup plans for illness, etc. We owe it to our students and staff to establish best safe practices. Please delay school opening as suggested by Dr. Norman and as written by Governor Kelly. That ends that comment. The next comment came in July 22nd by Bonnie Spielman. I think it is a grave mistake to open up the schools back up yet. It will be impossible to keep the masks on and keep children from touching things and each other. It is unreasonable to expect them to sit in one place for a whole day with no breaks and to eat their lunches at their desks. I know parents want to get their children back in school, but this is not the way. It is a foolhardy decision that can only lead to disaster. It will also put undue stress on the teachers. Please reconsider your decision. I can tell you that if I had children in school, they would not be returning under the circumstances we are now facing. I do not want to bury a grandchild, nor see anyone else have to do so either. That is the end of that comment. The next comment came in July 23rd, 24th. July 23rd and 24th from Joni Scribner. If these questions need to be asked online, then school needs to be held online. Your safety is not any more important than my child's safety. What say you, USD 290? Why don't you ask the kids what they think about going back to school? I'm sure our kids are well informed of what's going on in the world. Tell the children what is going to happen during the school year. They need to know from you the positive and the negative. Do you have enough custodians to sanitize the school daily? I haven't seen any additional hiring for custodians. If big colleges cancel their FB season, we should cancel football as well. RNC just canceled their convention because of the surge of cases. President Trump said the surge is going to get worse. Do not open the school. If my children contract this virus, I will hold each and every one of you personally responsible. This ends this comment. The next comment came July 23rd from Courtney Evans. I'm 25 and I made a will the other day. Never in my life I thought I would have a will at 25 because of COVID and the potential exposure I will be at while at work. Because let's face it, since Ottawa is not enforcing masks and this county keeps going up roughly 7 cases every 2 days, someone at the schools is going to get it. But you really want to expose children? We haven't even began to talk about what flu season is going to look like. Compromised immune systems that are going to open the door for an even bigger exposure risk. Not to mention, if one of our staff contracts COVID, what is sick leave going to look like? Is the district going to pay to put a ventilator down someone's throat so that way they can breathe? We should be following KC's school district's lead and not open up at all. It's disgusting that we have to even have a conversation about opening up for face-to-face classes at all, because while COVID is hanging around and people aren't taking the measures needed to slow the spread, we're going to have this exact conversation come December for the spring semester. The board thought COVID was serious enough back in March to close the schools, and there weren't nearly as many cases as there was now. Please, for the love of God, do the right thing. The acceptable amount of deaths for anyone is 0. And that ends that comment. The next comment came in July 23rd from Veranda Morning. The comment reads, "Our family knows you are all putting a lot of time and effort into this decision, and we will support whatever is decided. In our opinion, we feel confident that we can send our kids back to school and that our district will take whatever precautions it deems necessary to keep our kids safe. We are also willing to help in any possible way for changes to take place." That ends that comment. The next comment came in July 23rd, submitted by Valerie Shaw. Comment reads, "While there are several reasons I believe we need to be back in our buildings, my biggest concern is the potential domino effect. If a student or teacher gets COVID, who will have to be quarantined? The whole class, all classes if a teacher gets it in the middle school or high school? And while people are quarantined, will they be paid, paras, etc.? We struggle to get subs now. How will we cover classes in these situations? I know how important face-to-face time, sports, and the arts are, but it seems to me that pushing our start date back is in the best interest of our community currently." This ends that comment. The next comment came in July 23rd by Erica Herzog. Comment reads, "I know the decision you have to make is very complicated as there is really no right answer. It's more of what the lesser of two evils. I appreciate everyone's work and dedication regarding the student safety. I can't imagine being in your shoes right now and the pressure each of you must be experiencing. With the rising cases, I have been so uneasy about kids starting school. With that said, I also find comfort with our school district, and I know you will make the best decision to protect our children and faculty by postponing the start of the school year. I have no doubt you are all going to protect the children and do what is right, not what is easy. You always do. Thank you all for everything you do." That ends that comment. This comment came in July 23rd by Amy Carlson. "Hello for the virtual or remote learning. I hope there is some flexibility for when the learning can take place, particularly for elementary classes. As many of us are working parents, if we choose for our students to learn from home, many of us cannot accommodate a normal school schedule, but will need to work with our students on the evenings and weekends. Thank you for taking the time to read this." This ends this comment. The next comment came in July 23rd from Jamie Akinwandi. The comment reads, "First of all, thank you for serving at a time of unprecedented decision-making. Hoping there isn't, but in the case of an outbreak and not enough staff/substitutes to cover, is there a plan of how to keep students in class without combining classes?" This ends that comment. The next comment came in July 23rd from Glendy Spiegel. The comment reads, "We are praying for you, the school board and administrators, as you have to make ever-changing decisions about our Ottawa schools. In light of the constant changes from our governor and local schools being given the ability to opt out of certain things, I would ask you to please allow mask wearing to be optional and not mandatory. There are way too many reasons to list as to why. I'm sure you've read all of the many pros and cons. Let the individual families decide what is best for their students. It is truly hard to breathe in a mask even for a short time. Many kids feel claustrophobic in them. They are uncomfortable and distracting, and we touch our faces more than ever in them. I can see them being a huge distraction to learning, and education is what they're in school for. These few reasons don't even scratch the surface as to why families should decide for their own kids whether they should wear a mask or not. Healthy people don't need them, but if someone wants to be cautious, then go ahead and wear one. Just please give us the option. I'm sure you also know how this pandemic is affecting our kids' mental health. I personally know countless families whose children of all ages are becoming depressed, angry, withdrawn, anxious, suicidal, etc., and all because of the upheaval in their world. People need to be together. Kids need to get some normalcy back in their lives. Please don't delay school any longer or close it down when people get sick. It will happen, and we will all deal with it like we always have. You will probably have less illness if you just have students wipe down desks when they come into the classroom, wash hands after the restroom and before a meal, and don't come to school sick. Forget social distancing. Those 3 things alone will help quite a bit and are just common sense. Let the kids eat together. Continue with sports. Get the kids outside often. Keeping them active helps them stay healthy, physically and mentally. Thank you for hearing me. This ends this comment. The next comment came in July 24th from Tom Corley. His comment reads, "When it comes to the health and safety of our children, nothing else should come first. As a parent of a senior in high school for the upcoming year, it is important to me that he is first safe and secondly has an outstanding year. I was very disappointed in our State Board of Education not following our governor's mandate, as this pandemic is not under control, and we should be doing everything we can to ensure the safety of our children, teachers, and staff as they return to school. The highest health expert in Kansas has said, quote, 'Schools cannot be safe islands in unsafe communities. Teachers are at significant risk,' end quote. We know cases of the deadly virus are rising, and we know children can spread it. We have all read what top experts are saying about the dangers of groups indoors. As a parent who has not seen any formal plan on how the district plans on keeping teachers, children, and staff safe in our buildings and classrooms, how can you expect we as parents to decide between online classes and being in the classroom? Without more information, I believe you are almost forcing a decision to have our children take classes online in order for them to be safe. Please take the additional time to formulate a comprehensive plan that can be shared with parents so that we can be assured our children are safe. Please give it time. Students and our teachers should be going back now. Let's be patient to keep everyone safe. Thank you." This ends this comment. The next comment came in July 24th by Jonathan Day. The comment reads, "Wipe away your political affiliation for a moment. Look around and see each other as human beings. We all want the same thing. We want our families to be healthy. We want our kids to be safe when they leave the house. We want our family members to live long, healthy lives. We all want our kids to have the best education. That is not the question. The question is, will they be safe? And this answer is uncertain. We just don't know if they will be safe. You can read any headline with the stark news that the recent surge in COVID-19 is in a younger age group and it is not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's getting worse. We have all seen pictures of groups of kids together with no masks. We have all had someone we know test positive. And recent Franklin County data shows more teenagers are testing positive. Trump just said, quote, 'Districts may need to delay reopening for a few weeks. That's up to governors,' end quote. That decision was made by our governor and was overridden by people with no medical backgrounds over a Zoom meeting in the comfort of their own homes. You are now liable for this decision that could save lives. A child, a teacher, a staff member, a community member, friend, parent, grandparent. My children will be choosing remote learning. Teachers and staff are not given that opportunity. If we reopen now, there will be cases. People will get sick. Schools will shut down. We know that remote learning is not ideal, but it is preferable to severe illness or lives lost in a community. Teachers should not be going back in 2 weeks, and students should not be going back until cases are decreasing, not increasing. I can't speak to you in public today. I can't go to a movie in a public theater. We have all been encouraged by top infectious disease doctors not to meet indoors with groups of people. There is a reason for that. It is not safe. We know this pandemic won't last forever, but your decision today could affect lives forever if you choose to send children and teachers back too early. This decision is about lives. Making decisions about saving lives shouldn't be a school board member's responsibility. However, that burden has been placed upon you today. The virus and the impacts of the virus are a much higher priority than social emotional well-being. There is nothing at all that should come before health and safety. The best possible education is important, but not at the expense of people's health and lives. Thank you. This ends that comment. The next one came in July 24th by Leroy Hildebrandt. Comment reads, I'm a parent of a student at the middle school. I'm 61 years old. I think the school should do online schooling until December to see if the coronavirus goes away or a vaccine to stop this pandemic. I'm afraid that if I get it and my wife, that we will die from it. Everywhere we go, we use extra precautions. I know it's hard for the schools to keep the kids 6 feet apart because I saw it this summer over at the middle school. When they was exercising, the kids were bunched up, so I made my call about it. So I'll do the online schooling if they have an option. I'm going to protect my family from this. Once a child makes it to school and it hit, the whole class will explode. This ends that comment. The next comment came in July 24th by Heidi Whittier Duderstadt. Comment reads, "Thank you to the school board, administrators, teachers, and staff for all of their tireless work these last several months. I'm writing to add my voice in favor of offering additional educational options for students and teachers beyond just a completely in-person or completely virtual option, whether that's a small group learning, combinations of both in-person and virtual learning, etc. As I'm sure we found out these last several months, this is definitely not a black and white situation. So black and white, either/or solutions just do not feel like they would be an effective fit that is tailored to the situation at hand. I recognize I'm not an expert in education and would not be able to offer an informed recommendation of exactly what that would look like. But I do think additional and more creative options are needed to best protect the safety and learning needs of both students and teachers. I have also noticed an increased need to also address the socio-emotional needs of USD290's teachers and staff as well. I sincerely applaud the school board and administrators for taking steps to incorporate resources for the mental health and social needs of the students in the current environment, which I also believe to be incredibly important. It has just been impressed upon me lately that our teachers and staff too are experiencing their own very valid anxieties, worries, fears, and increased stress levels related to teaching and working in our schools in the middle of a pandemic. So as you are building in mental health and social resources for our students, I would like to ask the school board to please also incorporate mental health and social resources for your teachers and staff as well. Again, thank you for your time and continued work for our students, teachers, and community during a really difficult time." This ends that comment. We are down to our final comment, which came in July 24th, submitted by Shauna Caro. Comment reads, "As a parent of 2 young children who attend this district and as an educator who works in this district, I would like to address the delayed start of the 2020-2021 academic year. As an educator, my concerns lie with the safety of myself, other staff, and of course our students and families. It is not acceptable to ask me, other staff, or our children to risk our lives for the sole purpose of children to attend school in a physical manner, especially as cases continue to rise in Kansas and Franklin County, and additionally as we approach the fall and winter when illnesses of all kinds rise exponentially. Students and staff alike already must face seasonal illnesses, often consistently throughout each school year. To put students back into a mass gathering setting, regardless of PPE or other social distancing practices, is dangerous for everyone involved and will result in the loss of life and severe illness for many. As a parent to students in this district, I am terrified that my students will attend school and contract COVID or otherwise pass it along to me or other members of our family who are all high risk and who also live in Ottawa's community and beyond. It only takes one infected person to spread this deadly disease to an entire community. My experience both as an educator and as a parent is that it is impossible for students of any age to remain socially distanced, especially since many of them have not seen each other since March, and still some others have not been practicing social distancing since we have been out of school. It is in the best interest of students, parents, families, staff, and the community as a whole to delay the start of in-person school for as long as possible. I urge the board to vote to delay the start of school for as long as possible to reduce the disastrous effects of COVID-19 on our community." This ends this comment. That ends all the comments, and just a reminder that if you did submit something that came in after the deadline on Friday, those will be vetted and then read at the next board meeting. So we are down to reports and presentations. Dr. Cobbs, you have Jeff Porter here from Mid-America to present an update on the Turf and Track project to OHS.
Yep. Members of the board, I'd like to introduce Jeff Porter. He is our project manager from Mid-America Sports Construction. He's here to answer questions today about the current project, timeline for the current project, any questions that you may have regarding such and where we're moving forward. So at this point, I'll turn it over to him and let him discuss it with you.
Okay. Well, things are moving fairly well. Stabilization was completed, I believe, last week or the previous week. Drainage was on the football field. The whole perimeter drain was completed last Friday.
I'm sorry, can you speak a little bit more into the microphone? I'm struggling. Thank you.
No problem. Sorry.
Appreciate it.
That better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So the drainage on the football field, the perimeter was completed last Friday, and we're ready to start concrete curbing as well as the stone installation. That should start the forming for the concrete curbs for the track perimeter, or the turf perimeter should start forming tomorrow. If weather allows, we should be able to start hauling rock in on Wednesday for the football field. They've been working on the drainage on the soccer field today. They should be able to finish that up for the most part tomorrow. And curbing will start right away on the soccer field as well. So with that, as of today, we are anticipating the turf for the fields being delivered on the 10th of August, with, as long as all conditions allow, we should be able to have the football field completed by the 28th, I believe was the scrimmage day that we're trying to meet. That won't have the track completed, but that would have the football field complete. Accessing to the football field, that's going to be another discussion topic. So, as for the soccer field, we should be able to also be really close to meeting that 28th date. We are having an issue that just came up last Friday with AstroTurf and COVID, with some fiber shortages for the turf. So the two fields for this district, as well as two other fields, one for Mill Valley and one for another project in Iowa, were four of the fields that were affected under my watch. And so the manufacturing is in Dalton, Georgia, and Georgia is one of the harder hit states with COVID. So they've been dealing with plant shutdowns since May. And like I say, just last week they notified us that it's finally hitting some of our projects for this, late July and August push. On top of that, we also ended up having to quarantine one of our install crews, our in-house install crews, just as of this afternoon. That's working down in Neosho. One of their crew members came in contact with two people. Their parents actually tested positive today. So now the whole crew has had to quarantine as of today until they can get tested on Friday. And then, we won't know those results until Monday. So the COVID is hitting our industry at this point as well. So with that, I can take any questions you have.
Board members, I would like to ask, if you would like to ask a question or speak, if you could please indicate to me that you would like to take the floor, and then I'll recognize you and you can state your name, just to help all of our viewers hear and understand who's speaking. So at this time, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Porter? Yes.
Well, as...
Go ahead and tell us who you are.
Yeah, I'm Susan Moore. As you know, this has always been a source of pride for our school and our community. So anything you can do to get it on time and so that it's usable would be good. Because right now we all struggle, and as you hear from the comments, that we all need that mental health boost. And some molecule of normalcy would be nice. And so if there's any way, and we may not start sports, we don't know, but all those things come into play. So I just want you to know how important this project is to us in this district and to our kids.
Thank you.
So it wasn't really a
Madam-
question, it was just...
Harold, yes.
Okay, Okay, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead and
I
introduce
won't hog
yourself
the
here.
time, and then
This
I'll
is
come back
here-
and ask more but I have two questions. One is, what soil testing did you do prior to starting? I do a lot of projects and I do all my soil testing when I roll in. And then I know we approved the change order to do the soil, I just went blank on that, but. Anyway, the
Stabilization.
question is, are you doing the testing when it's done? If so, what, are you doing nuclear testing, proctor testing for soil stabilization and compaction?
So we actually engaged Olson and Associates out of the Kansas City area, and they came down and did the soil borings and came up with the recommendation of recommending that the cement stabilization at 9 inches deep was recommended at the track, the football field, and the soccer field, all to reduce that shrink and swell potential. So after they made that recommendation, we did, at that time, have them come, or after they made the recommendation, we then took soil samples of all the areas again, back up to Olson so that they could pull the proctors so that we could have the proper testing done during the stabilization process. And all of that passed, and we have all the reporting of all that.
And then they'll come down and do the final testing to make sure are you shooting for 90 or 95%? What are you shooting for?
Yeah, it was all done at the time of installation, so all that's been completed. All the testing of the in-place product is done and passed.
It's already installed.
It is. It was completed at the beginning of last week.
Okay. And you've had it tested?
Yes, we had it tested from Olson.
Okay. And do you know what percent it came out at?
I'd have to look. I know it was, over the 95% recommended.
Okay. Okay. And you'll provide us those reports?
Absolutely,
as
I
a
can.
close
Yep,
out?
I can provide those to Dr. Cobbs.
Okay. I know and then my last kind of question, I know there's some concern about getting completed. I guess on my part, there's no concern about getting completed because you're under a contract to get completed. But there was a delay of getting started. And so, if there's a delay of getting started, there's potential delay of getting completed. Could you tell the board what the delay of getting started was related to?
So we did have a delay in the permitting process that I know some of the folks, the sales representatives were down and talked with Dr. Cobbs, after the bid letting and after the approval process about, potentially getting started earlier than, after graduation if things changed.
Correct.
Again, that was a kind of a potential talk, just our sales representative doing his due diligence just in the case that we had some crews come available. That didn't come to fruition. I actually ended up having a crew scheduled to start here on May 11th. And I believe it was on the 9th of May, ended up getting a phone call with some permit questions. I thought we had done everything on our part to be prepared. And I'm not sure, I don't remember who our folks in the office had talked to at the city about permitting, but like I say, the day that I submitted for locate request, I guess the correct person from the city of Ottawa called and let us know that we didn't have our permitting that we needed. So that ended up being a costly delay of about 25 days or so. But after that, knowing that we still had the August 14th completion date, doing the fields should not have been a problem at that point. We got started, and as you guys can see, if you go out to the field, once we get to work, it does not take any time at all for our crews to get this put together. And then when it was decided to add the track component, it just kind of transpired and added some more things to the work. I know that there was some discussions back and forth with Dr. Cobbs, and and our sales reps about the timing and things that could happen after, football or after the final completion of the turf. And I don't know that everything was relayed properly to Dr. Cobb's, or if there was just a misunderstanding between what our salespeople and were saying. But as far as the full completion of a track project, that really isn't something that can happen during a football season. Just access in and out and things like that. It doesn't create good logistics to have football players tracking across a muddy, rock area that doesn't have asphalt on it yet. As well as when the track project got added, knowing that, it really was a saving grace, the delay, because if we didn't have the delay and the track got added, we would have just had to follow the existing elevations of the track as they were, because we would have already had the concrete curb in, and it would have been set. And then that would have been nearly a month before the track actually got approved. So we would have followed the existing track the way it was, which has your ups and downs and undulations in it. And as it is, now we're able to put the track in at that perfect elevation all the way around and make it a true running surface.
So you're saying that it's your recommendation we're not going to use the football field until the track is completed, and that is not the way I understood it when we had the track discussion. But I'll grant you, you weren't here and nobody from your firm was here to represent the track discussion. But I was under the impression that we could play on the football field while the track was being completed. Is that not the case?
Well, like I say, there have to be some safety concerns that come into play with that, because you're going to have an uneven surface. If the asphalt's not installed yet, when you guys start using that facility, you're going to have, a 4.5 inch or 4 inch drop down to that subgrade elevation of where the rock base is. So it's just something that has to be taken into account and make sure that the logistics are worked out for that.
Okay, and my last question, then I'll let somebody else talk about it. You've now used 2 dates for your ending date. I was under the impression it was the 14th. You must be under the impression it's a different day. Can you explain the difference between the 2 dates?
Yep, so contractually, you're right. Our contract does read August 14th. And in subsequent conversations, as we were getting into this process that we had with Dr. Cobb's, knowing that August 28th is the scrimmage day that is really trying to be hit for sure. That's kind of the absolute dead date, I guess. That's really what I'm trying to make sure I hit.
Okay, I'll let other board members talk.
Thank you, Harold. Yes.
Chris Cunningham. I think what happened with your permitting, if I understand best, is the city stopped it because they didn't have the state stormwater runoff approved. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you guys usually have to get a storm runoff with all the under drainage that goes under a field?
It really just depends on the jurisdiction.
But what I'm saying is this is not out of the norm. This is a typical thing. Stormwater runoff becomes a hot topic almost on any new project anyways, just because you're introducing a bunch of water that would typically be taken on by the soil is now on runoff.
And that's not actually correct. Most of our engineers that do our calculations actually do calculate it that it's virtually the exact same as a natural grass field, because most natural grass fields, especially at a high school level, are not maintained in such a way that allow for the moisture to be going into the soil. They're usually so hard that it's a straight runoff like a parking lot. So when they do their calculations, you're virtually doing no different additions to the stormwater.
Yeah, but I would just say that with adding the drains all the way around, and those are going to be tied in, and they're going to daylight out to somewhere, correct?
Correct. Well, it's tying into
have-
the existing. It's tying into the existing infrastructure that's already there.
Okay.
We're not adding any new exit piping into either one of those fields.
But the water is going into the storm outlet
The same as it
somewhere.
was before.
Okay. I guess my only other question is, why didn't we do the soil test at the very front end of the job after we approved the contract? And why wasn't that permitting like started right then? Because that could have easily saved us some of those delays that happened. I think you said May 11th. I saw out here when we were stripping dirt, I saw that Olson was there, and I assumed what they were doing was taking core samples because I saw them with the machine and tool doing that.
Yep, so just to make sure that I had all the correct information coming into the meeting tonight, I made sure to do some research with our our estimating team that bid the project. And they had some conversations post-bid, pre-approval that were, once you guys approve this, it's really important that the district engage that geotech that you've already had doing some of your other work at the high school, to have them pull those samples and get that report so that we know if it needs stabilization or not. So when I got down here and we actually got started, I guess I didn't realize that hadn't occurred yet. And when that hadn't occurred and we were working through pricing on the track, I went ahead and incorporated all that, requirement into that pricing to make sure that we could get the soil boring, so I knew we had to have it for the track. And I mean, that's what caused that delay there.
Right. And in your defense, I don't remember if you were here when it got presented to us, but we did tell them that we knew of soil issues on this side of OHS, which is the side that the track facility is on. I would have just thought when we gave them that information and said like, hey, we just did a huge bond project, we know we have soil issues on this side, that would have been a hot topic that they would have shared with you, so you could have gotten that to maybe going a little faster than what it did.
Yeah, and again, I think there might have just been some misunderstanding on that portion of it. Ryan Hunt was, I believe, the one that was having some of those conversations, and the way he relayed it to me was that the district was going to be doing that, being that that's typically how geotech is handled, is the owner is the one that engages that person as a third party. Because if I hire them, it really doesn't give the owner any security in the results that are getting done. I mean, they're working for me at that point, not for you.
Well, and I guess I'll just say lastly, I guess it's disappointing in your defense also again that when we had this track conversation that no one from your firm came down and presented, then maybe we wouldn't have this, as you called it, misunderstanding with being able to get the track in and not have a safety issue.
And again, I think if it was known, I know Dr. Cobbs and I were having some conversations that day, and I mean, if I would have known that you guys would have liked to have someone there, I would have been more than happy to be here.
Okay. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
I had a question.
Yes.
Melidia Payne. What did you just say about something with the pricing and something that you did with the track?
Yep.
What did you say?
So when we were going through the track pricing, I made sure that since we didn't have the geotech, from the district yet, that we made sure that we incorporated the geotech into the track, knowing that it was having the issues, to make sure that we could have those recommendations.
So at that time, had you already done the part for the turf?
No, ma'am. Again, because in the original bid, in the RFP, it didn't come out and specify that it had to have the geotech done.
And do you know what that date would have been for the track? When you did it, when you're saying that you went ahead and put it into the price of the track to cover the turf, when
Correct.
would that have been?
I'd have to look back. I mean, when it got submitted and to you all to look at, I know it was in there.
So if you hadn't started the work yet on the turf at the time that you did the pricing for the track, how had you learned that, and why didn't you go ahead and do the geotech between the between the time that you were doing the track pricing and when you actually started?
So I think I'm understanding the question. So when we did the original bid for and submitted for the RFP, which got approved for the 2 turf fields, so the way the wording was in the RFP was there was something in there about providing pricing for the soil stabilization, but at the same time there was also a line in the RFP that said not to change or modify the bid form, and the bid form didn't have a place to put any type of soil stabilization pricing. So we didn't have any type of pricing included in our RFP price for soil stabilization, whether it be a unit price or anything else, if you look back at the bid docs. I believe, based on, again, talking with the estimating folks, that conversation was brought up pre-board meeting, post-bid, just to make sure that when it came to the board, that there was some ballpark figure of what stabilization could cost in the case that stabilization might be needed. And on your guys' field here, based on my experience of 15 plus years and seeing the soil that was out there, I would have never guessed that your football field or soccer field needed to be stabilized based on the conditions that it presented. I had fully loaded tandem and triaxle dump trucks driving across it and never made any dents or impressions in the soil. And that would generally lead me to believe that the soils are stable, as well as just the soil makeup and the composition of them.
Right. So that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that you are stating to Chris that you didn't do the soil testing to be ahead of time and not have a delay because you didn't know it needed to be done.
Right.
But now you're telling me that you did know it needed to be done when you, at the time that you made the track purchase or bid, which was prior to you actually starting working, so you could have done the soil sample ahead of time so you wouldn't have been delayed.
So we had a fairly good suspicion that the track was going to need some type of stabilization just based on the conditions that the track itself were presenting. I mean, you could physically see the cracking and the breaking in the track. So that was the difference between the two.
Well, yeah. So I'm understanding what he's saying. So when we put out the bid, and
I got it.
it gets crazy with the,
Okay.
but
That
turf,
answered your question.
huh?
That answered my question.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Porter? No? Mr. Porter, thank you so much for coming today to entertain our questions.
Madam President,
Oh, one more, yes.
if I can ask a follow-up question, I wanted other people to speak before. You mentioned in your opening comment that there may be a material delay. When will you know if you have a material delay? And in your opinion, does that alter your finish date both contractually and a reality?
So, got too close there. As far as the current completion date that I'm shooting for, like I mentioned, was the 28th of August, which contractually, yes, that is outside of our contract terms. And that is to complete the field work itself. Again, how that gets accessed at that point has to be another discussion. As far as the material delay, those are some conversations that can be had as far as the existing fiber, what was bid, which was a trionic fiber. I already know that is delayed until at least the 10th of August. A final deadline or a final date on what it actually ends up being, we get production updates about every 2 days. They have another production meeting tomorrow morning to let us know after that kind of where things are at. There is another option to go with a different fiber. It's about a 2-year older technology. It's called an HM. Again, I just kind of learned about this Friday. Dr. Cobbs and I haven't even had any discussion about this yet. I'm just bringing it to you all, which could they have that fiber, and it could move both fields up in production by a week minimum, if they don't have any other delays on the Trionic. What that does is it changes the soccer turf. What we presented and got approved on from a submittal standpoint was a Ligaturf product that is that meets all the FIFA specifications. So it'll basically meet FIFA, except it won't be tested, because to be FIFA certified, FIFA physically has to come out and test each field, and we're not going to do that. But it meets their requirements for certification. So it would remove that from the soccer field, but potentially move everything up at least a week earlier.
Okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Madam President,
Yes.
Chris Cunningham, how long did it take on stabilization? How many days of duration did that take to?
The physical work,
Yeah,
2.5 days.
2.5 days?
It was supposed to be a week. Olson had it scheduled for a week based on our information that we gave them. They worked 2.5 very, very long days.
Had to be, because that's a lot of area to cover
Yep.
between two surfaces. So my only concern for you is if we're not getting delivered till the 10th of August, this week, as you know, weather doesn't look that great, and that would leave you 2 weeks left to hit the 14th, but to get the delivery on the 10th of the turf, that gives you that week to get it laid.
Yep.
I wish you luck.
Well, as I've said, I don't plan on making the 14th.
Okay.
I have one last
Yeah.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Melodia Payne, so you didn't give us a date of when you thought it would all be completed.
With the track and everything? Well, so I'd have to look back at some paperwork. Working around football schedules and everything, it's really hard for me to give you an actual end date because of the track surfacing and trying to work around whatever schedules you guys end up having out there on the field. That was just something that Dr. Cobbs and I were going to have to work through on a final completion date for the track and everything.
So if you were to give him a date, what would you?
Well, it depends on what events you guys have out there and when I can be on it.
Okay. But you're not recommending that we use it until it's all done for the football team?
Again, I mean, it's logistics, and I mean, so when a project's under construction, my insurance company doesn't allow anybody to be out there without you guys signing off on it and saying you're going to take that responsibility on. Because if they trip on that edge and twist an ankle, they can sue Mid-America Golf. So you'd have to basically sign off and say you're accepting responsibility for that.
Okay, and if we didn't use the field and you didn't have to work around our schedule, when would the track be done?
So, let's see. I'm currently trying to get an asphalt crew scheduled, which would put it at again, I'm working with two different things here. So it kind of depends on what leeway I have, because if I'm held to having to have the turf done, then I have to wait till the turf's done to put the asphalt down. Okay? So if we all can work together and we can figure out another way, then I can do the asphalt first and let it cure out while we put the turf down. So the asphalt requires a 28-day cure time before I put a surface on it. So the turf typically would take a 21-day install process. We're going to put a bunch of people out here. We're going to get it done. And as pointed out, I'm going to try and get it done in about 10 to 14 days, taking a little over a week off that time frame. I still have to have that cure time on the asphalt. So I would like to do the asphalt the week of the 10th, delay the turf install slightly before I start it, so that I can get that done and let the asphalt be curing while we're installing the turf and taking some of those days away. If I have to wait till after the turf's done, Then I just have to, so that would put it at around the 28th. That would put it at, we'll just say the 1st of September before I can finish asphalt. That would put it at the end of September before it's ready to have surface put on it. Then I need another 14 days for surface. So you're looking at the middle of October, which I think was the date that I put in the change orders. I'd have to look back. So in that scenario, the middle of October, best case without any weather.
And that was in the change order?
Yes. It wasn't all wrote out exactly like that, but that was the date I think that was in it.
Let's follow up on that line of questioning. Then work with me. You are concerned about if you finish the turf, but don't asphalt, that you have people walk across the mud or whatever it is, rock or whatever base you may have down at that point in time. You're talking about the curb being a source of potential injuries, people tripping, falling, twisting ankles, whatever. If you lay the asphalt first, what does it delay the completion of the football field? 2 or 3 days, a week?
Typically, that's about a 3-day process. So we'd have the fine grader come in and finish the fine grade of the rock. And then typically you're looking at about a 2-day process, 2 to 2.5, depending on, how fast the crew moves. So we'll just say 3 days.
And then how do you cross that new asphalt, especially in hot August days, without causing pumping in the asphalt? How do you protect the asphalt, because you are carrying everything across that asphalt? I'm not worried about the workers; they're okay. But will you need to cross that asphalt with any equipment?
Yeah. So this process, the way we're discussing it now, is done on virtually every track. I mean, that is the ideal situation, is you get your rock base on the field done, you put your asphalt down, you put your turf in, and then you track surface. That is the ideal situation. So, yes, they do have to cross it. They do use a track bridge. They put some padding down, plywood, plastic, and they don't come across it with the heavy loads. They reach across it with a boom lift, so that they're not actually, tracking across it.
Okay. So 3 to 5 business days delay if we have you asphalt it before you lay down turf.
For the turf install, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. To avoid all of this, could we borrow, Linda Alderman, could we borrow OU's football field for games?
I think West Franklin is doing that.
We probably, if we want to talk about the logistics of how we do it, we would build a bridge across that. If we didn't put the asphalt down, you simply build a bridge to create a flat level across to the turf. There will be curbing on the side, so you just go from curb to curb with the bridge, make sure that that's where our students stay, slope it down so that if somebody steps off the curb, they're not going to fall off. So that's not a whole lot different than what we've done with some other programs in the past, as we try to get across the track and try to do some different things. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Certainly, I recognize that Mid-America doesn't want to accept that liability, but that's something that we can do to make sure that we have access to the playing surface. I would tell you that right now, I think Ottawa University is considering a lot of things, and they're trying very hard not to engage in any conversation with anybody about the use of their facilities.
Okay.
So without discussing anything that Ottawa University is doing or not doing with their year, and it's not our place to speak to that. But when we've had conversations with them about the utilization of their facilities and other capacities, they've been very upfront that they're not ready to discuss any of those things. So we can work through that.
Any other questions for Mr. Porter?
Yes, Madam President.
Yes.
Chris Cunningham. I guess I'm thinking, because I pour concrete, so I'm guessing your deal with asphalt's the same way with mine. Curing process is not necessarily always a structure issue of traffic across it. In my book, a lot of times, like my core test will come out that it's already at strength way before 21 or 28 days. What it will still show is there's moisture still coming out. And if I try to put a substrate on that, is that the same deal with your asphalt trying to put track down, that there's still too much moisture coming out of that?
It's the oils.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's not
It's not traffic, it's
Right.
the oil. It has to have that cure time.
So my
And-
thought is you get the asphalt down to get that time going. I mean, I'm only one person, but I would hate to see this drag on and a student athlete or somebody get hurt at whatever capacity, or even worth taking the risk.
And can I interject real quick? So, I mean, the standard is 28 days for asphalt, 28 days for concrete. With concrete, there is no leeway, just because of what you're talking about. It takes that long for the moisture to come out of the concrete. With asphalt, depending on the weather that we have, how hot it is, how much rain we have, you can shorten that time frame up to, down to 14 days. So I don't typically tell people that. I like to have my window, but being as where we are, I will give you that information. At that point, it'd just be a conversation between Dr. Cobbs and I and you all to decide if, in our expert opinion, we feel that it's had enough weather to proceed at 14 days or 16 days or 18 days, or if we wait till at 28.
And I'll do a follow-up question to that. Does asphalt have the same thing like concrete? For me, there is a test I can put on it to
No.
test the moisture coming out of it. Ooh, that scares me then.
That's why I typically stand at the 28 days and let it be.
Yeah, because you won't know that that surface is going to peel until it peels.
Does
and- Yes. So me thinking through what everyone said and asked questions, when we start pushing into that September, we get away from the hot, dry climate. And if we don't have asphalt laid, now we have a goldfish pond or an alligator moat all the way around our football field. I just thinking through it, I think the asphalt needs to get laid, and if you do it the way you say you typically do it, it will look cleaner, and the concrete curb will not get damaged by laying asphalt if the asphalt's laid, because typically you guys come in and trim that nice and neat for the curbing to go in, correct? If
Right.
you do the asphalt
Typically,
first.
yeah, it has a saw cut, which we had actually done the day before you
Right.
approved the track project.
Right.
So we had already done the cutting, so it would have been a nice, smooth concrete edge right there.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Porter, thank you for coming and indulging our questions. We are just very passionate about getting this right for our students and our community, and we have seen pictures of turf fields that you have done, and I know it is going to be wonderful when it's completed, and we are so looking forward to seeing that finished product for sure. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure you guys have the best product at the end of the day that we can give you.
Absolutely.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, section 5.02 is our next area for discussion. Dr. Cobbs is going to present on Spark funds and how they can be pursued.
All right, we won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I did want to let you know that COVID relief funds have different names throughout them. We've seen ESSER funds here for us. We've seen ESSER funds for special education. We know that we have a certain amount of funds that were provided to us under COVID relief. The county has also been given funds, and we're now expecting, after the president's statement and some government officials from the Fed statement today, that we can expect more COVID relief dollars coming our way. But the reality of it is that the county has a little over $5 million in COVID relief funds that they call Spark funds or Spark assistance, and we have to put together a form that would identify exactly how we might allocate or be asked to allocate those funds towards the school system. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to do, and Dean, if you would scroll down towards the bottom and you can get to the dollars here. So that's where our ESSER funds are, and you can see those if you keep scrolling down to right there in one more little block, so all the blue. Okay, so this is where we're at with what we'll be asking for. So the Spark funds give us an opportunity to allocate dollars to PPE, to disinfectant cost, to what we have already incurred and what we have in future costs. It also gives us the opportunity to address digital costs. as well as distance learning and the training for these things. So you'll see a couple of things there. Anything that we've currently incurred, we've asked to be reimbursed through Spark or to be provided for through Spark funds. In part, given what we don't know about what's happening, I would like to save all of our COVID relief dollars to address instruction and needs for instruction should they occur. So that we don't spend, you can see up there, we got about $80,000 that has currently been spent on disinfectant and PPE prior to school starting. If that's taken out of our COVID relief dollars, you're getting close to about a quarter of your COVID relief funds being gone already. So we'd asked the county for some of those things, and I think that we'll be reimbursed for some of those things, but this is the initial piece of that. The other part that comes in is there's about $250,000 that I've addressed there to continue with additional technology needs, should we have them. One of them you'll hear about tonight in terms of hotspots and how we address students in a remote environment. The other piece of that is to address computers that we've already purchased and the possibility of ordering more should the board decide that we need to do so. And then you see about a $260,000 cost, and I initially put that in there not knowing what our board will decide tonight in terms of our calendar, that if we needed to add more days outside of the teacher contract day, it costs us about $70,000 a day to have licensed staff on site. If we had to do something beyond the 181 days that we have them contractually obligated to work with us for, and we needed more time, then certainly we could utilize some of those dollars to pay staff, also substitute staff, also classified staff. So begin to see what we would ask for within these dollar amounts, but before we put it off, I just wanted to let the board know how we would be responding to the county's request for Spark dollars, and that we may or may not be approved for those as we move forward. Any questions?
What was that number you just said for the cost to have the staff for?
$70,000 a day for our licensed staff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions for Dr. Cobbs? All right.
Okay,
Thank you
very
very
good.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we are moving on to our action items tonight. First up is the strategic plan update. Dr. Cobbs?
Yeah, and it flipped on us. We should start with the strategic plan instead of the reopen plan. So we'll get through the strategic plan first. I would guess that Dean's had that open for a while and it probably hasn't updated. But so we'll start with the strategic plan. A couple of things with the strategic plan as we updated, as we said that we would through the strategic plan, biannual update of what we've done. You've seen that already. It's been presented to you. It's been presented in the board update. The biggest piece, we did not change anything in terms of what the strategic plan was addressing. What we changed was the scope or the sequence in which it would happen, specifically that we identified language that would indicate that either all staff was responsible for it or all students were responsible for it, and there you can see some of that there. The other thing that we identified was that we began to split apart pieces that were specific to buildings. So the biggest ones were OHS and OMS. We had them on the same time frame for implementation, and the reality of it is they've gone two divergent paths in terms of their implementation. At the middle school, the grading aspect of what we needed to accomplish became a much more important focus for them, where at the high school it was dealing with the schedule. So instead of identifying that both of them had to have the same processes over the course of time, we split them out so that they could meet their needs for the building. So that is the strategic plan. What you're being asked to approve tonight is the changes. If you choose not to, then the old strategic plan remains in place. So we're not really discussing the ins and outs of what is in the strategic plan, simply the changes that exist there. But there were some questions last time about standards-based grading, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Fullerton and Mr. Stoltenberg to provide some insights to you as to what standards-based grading practices look like at the secondary level. I think there are some misconceptions about what we're actually trying to accomplish in grades 6 through 12 versus what we're trying to accomplish pre-K through 5. So I'll turn it over to these two and let them go.
Thank you again for having us tonight to speak a little bit about what the process has looked like for us transitioning to standards-based grading practices at the middle school level. Like Dr. Cobb said, it is a little bit different than what we see at the elementary level. We still operate within the confines of the ABCDF system. And so I'm going to start with just a little bit of the broad scope, the broader goals of what we're trying to accomplish through a standards-based grading practice model at Ottawa Middle School, and then Mr. Fullerton's going to take it over and talk about kind of his process of piloting, and kind of you'll be able to get a look at how a grade book might look like, or what the practice actually looks like in practice at the middle school level, at the secondary level. So our first broad goal that we really wanted to address was looking at what do grades actually communicate, because we recognize that at the end of the day, grades simply function as a means of communicating progress in some way. And when I ask a parent, or I say, hey, your student has 82%, I could ask 5 different people what 82% B means, and we'd probably get some variation of different answers. And so what we really wanted to focus on is that our goal is to ensure that the grades communicate content mastery. And so when I go to speak to a parent and I say they have an 82%, and I know Mr. Fullerton's going to present this as well, he can be specific in showing what is it that we do know, what that got us to that 82% B, what is it that we don't know that we need to fix, and those things. I think the most important thing here, and this is something that I can't reiterate enough, is that our practice is that we're going to incorporate these practices within the ABCDF system. So at the end of the day, we are not going to have the grade card that you might see at the elementary level. Kids will still receive a grade that goes on a transcript. It's the process of how we determine what we're communicating that matters here. The second big goal that we were looking at is wanting to find some consistency in our grading practices. And this was one of the overarching goals when we went into school redesign, when we started examining grading processes before we even decided that standards-based grading was going to be what we wanted to pursue. Thomas Guskey is one of the prominent researchers regarding grading and reporting in general. And one of his quotes here is, grades have long been identified by those in the measurement community as prime examples of unreliable measurement. Huge differences exist among teachers in the criteria they use when assigning grades. Even in schools where established policies offer guidelines for grading, significant variation remains in individual teachers' grading practices. I know this is the case at Ottawa Middle School. I know this is the case at schools everywhere. This is certainly a part of research that's shown that grading in general becomes very inconsistent when we don't have some kind of consistent practice and framework in place. So these are some of the process that we wanted to make sure that we ensure that consistency in grading practices. So Mr. Fullerton, and he'll speak to it in a little bit, has been piloting this for a year, and then in that process we started to try to bring some of our staff along as a whole group. And one of the things that we did at the beginning was ask this reflective question, going back to communication, is what do our grades actually communicate? So without getting into the data too deep here, you have 2 charts in front of you. The one on the left are our reading state assessment scores from 2 springs ago. Now, these were the assessment scores that I stood in front of you a year ago and said, you know, we made some incremental progress, but it's not good enough, and that we needed to do better. The chart on the right was something I presented to staff in conjunction with this. It was in February when we sat down as a staff. This is a grade distribution chart for every grade assigned to students at Ottawa Middle School, and this was in February. Now, both of these charts present a single moment in time, so they're not perfect data. However, if you look at the chart on the right, the 3 columns from left to right are A+, A, and A-. And I would say, without getting into the data too much, that these 2 things are asynchronous, that we are communicating one thing with our grades that don't necessarily line up with our students' achievement. Now, we recognize, again, that these are singular moments in time and they're not all telling, but we can see that if nothing else, our grade is not communicating student mastery of content. And if that's one of our goals, that's certainly something that we would need to address. So at that PD as well, Mr. Fullerton came in and presented to our staff what it has looked like in his classroom, as well as the practice and what he has done up to this point. And so he's been gracious enough to give his time and come present to you as well. So I'll turn it over to him. When he finishes, I'll come back and kind of talk about the what next for us at Ottawa Middle School.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to meet me before, I'm Ryan Fullerton. I teach middle school social studies, mostly down in 6th grade. I'm going to talk about the handout I gave you in a second, but I also intend on working on this in 7th grade a little bit. I was watching the last board meeting 2 weeks ago, and I knew there were some concerns expressed about standards-based grading. And so I just wanted to be able to come and talk about why I thought that these practices best served my students. I wanted to present to you the thought process I went through in getting this to actually happen in my classroom, and then, of course, actually show you what this looks like. So the things that I was thinking about when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do is, as Mr. Stoltenberg mentioned, I wanted to have a clear way to report what students have and have not learned. And I was not satisfied in the 2018-19 year when I started thinking about this that I was achieving that. So to use his example, if a student had an 82% in my class, I wasn't sure that I could tell that student, that parent, or any of my administrators what 82% of the content had been learned and what 18% had not. I could not fully articulate what the head meant. Also, if a parent came in and asked, well, what can we do to get this 82% up? My conversation with them would likely have something to do more about, well, they just need to turn this in, or let's take care of this work, as opposed to, well, this is what they have learned, this is what they're struggling with, how can we get that better? So I was kind of dissatisfied with where I was at that point and wanted to change. I also was frustrated by the fact that because I was assigning points on the basis of the size of assignments, a large project, a large test versus a small assignment, a student might do poorly on one project and it brings their whole grade down, even though if they had met all of the other objectives I had set for that class. And so I wanted to find a way to accurately communicate their progress on what they were learning and not just big projects. To get to that, I started having conversations with both Mrs. Bybee and Mr. Stoltenberg about how we could do this. My counterpart in 6th grade at the time was Kara Gearhart, and so she and I were working on curriculum mapping, which the district is working through anyways. So we were really starting to think about very specifically what standards, what targets are we trying to meet with our students, and then how can we make sure our grading practices are reflecting what students have and have not learned. We also met over the summer just to plan out what would this look like in the grade book, as well as to make sure we were on the same page about what students would be learning in our classroom. I also wanted to make sure it would work from a technological standpoint, so I had conversations with Kim Randall about how this would work in Skyward, because I did not want to start doing something and then have no way to actually post it online. Okay. Before I get into what it looked like in the grade book, do you have any questions about just the process and the thoughts behind why we're doing this? Okay, so I want to talk about what this looked like in my class. In front of you, I gave you a handout at the start of the meeting that looks like this. It has 10 learning targets listed on it. This is exactly what I give to students at the start of the quarter. I also email it to all parents starting this last school year. And in addition, every single day throughout a quarter, whatever it is we are doing that day is aligned with one of these 10 learning targets. And I post that on the board, and I review that with students. In the grade book, every assignment that students work with is also aligned with one of these. So if you can imagine a traditional grade book, these categories that are in the dark red might say homework is worth 10% of your grade, quizzes are worth 30%, tests are worth 40%. I worked with Kim Randall to rearrange this where targets were weighted at a certain percentage point. And that way, when the targets became the categories, I could put every assignment that aligns with that learning target into that category. So this is an example of a student who is doing very well, 99%. I can very quickly look at this and see that they met all 10 learning targets. And I still put comments along the way. You can see different comments I put in, reporting the progress they're making on it. But I wanted to also show you an example of a student who had not been doing as well as that student. So this is a point in time during 4th quarter last year in which a student was at a C. And so I can go to this grade book and see exactly why they have a C. So just looking at this, I can look at this and see targets 2, 3, 4, and 5 they did really well on. Target 1 we're still struggling with. I even have a comment in there saying they need to retake a quiz. Knowing that and knowing the target sheet I have before you, I can immediately look at this student's grade book and see, okay, it's not just that they struggled with assignments, it's not just that they need to retake a quiz. They have not shown me they know the difference between, in this case, historians and archaeologists. And now I can immediately both communicate with that student, that parent, what needs to be learned, and I can make a plan for intervening on how to make sure that child learns that content. And this will change as the quarter goes on. We were only at 5 targets, and so it'll evolve as we make progress throughout the quarter, but each time I can see exactly what a letter grade means. So if a student has an 82%, that now likely means they're struggling with 1.5 to 2 targets, roughly however the math works out, instead of just an amalgamation of points. I wanted to make sure as I was doing this that I clearly communicated this with students. I only did this with my 6th grade classes and not my 7th grade, just so I could take it step by step. So at back to school night last August, I offered a session in which they could come and learn about it before school really got going. I do distribute the same quarter sheet that you have. I post it to Google Classroom, email it out. These learning targets are posted on the wall every day, and at the start of every lesson, we review them. So I don't just go straight into content. I talk to students about what they should be able to do by the end of that lesson or the end of several lessons, depending on how long it takes. I don't always use the language on here. I will use it in student-friendly language, but that way they know what they're working towards. I've even also, towards the end of the year, started putting the learning target on individual assignments so that the first thing they see at the top of it is what they are working toward. And beyond that, I just explain why. So this is what you're learning and this is why they're doing it. So they constantly know what they're doing and why they're working toward it. It's not happening in a vacuum. As far as assessments go, when I'm working with projects and tests, I actually organize these by targets as well. So if I just had a classic multiple choice test, the questions are now arranged by target too. And that way, if a student does poorly, I can see this is the section and this is the target that we need to go rework. Study guides are organized that way as well. So yeah, that was a quick rundown of how I'm doing this in my classroom. Do you have any questions about how I'm doing this, or?
Well, I have a question. I have talked to you about this before. Say there's a student that continually does not do their homework because, I mean, this is a bright student. They don't do their homework. They have a whole row of zeros for homework turned in. But they meet all the targets. They show you that they know and can meet the targets. How does that work?
Yeah. Here, so I can go back to the grade book here. So my goal is to show that if they have not turned in the assignments, but they show me on an assessment that they have met the targets that they were working toward, I want the grade book to show that. So you can see on here I have all these comments where it says retook quiz, displayed knowledge orally. I had a student one day just explain to me the content, and it turned out they knew it. They just had not turned in that assignment. So if in the event that a student does not turn in a few assignments or does poorly on them, but then does very well in the test, I know a couple of things. First off, they know the content, and so I'm going to go in and remove the bad assignments from the grade book. I still want to make sure that their failure to do that work is reported, and so I'm very, very diligent about this comment section so that parents can track that work ethic issue, but the actual letter grade shows what they have and have not learned.
So they're not going to get a D- because they didn't turn homework in?
Correct.
Okay.
The other thing I know at that point is maybe from my teaching perspective, maybe it means my assignments aren't really doing much to prepare for students for that, and that's a reflective issue on my part that I need to. But it makes sure that, as you pointed out, that students are not failing when they know the material.
Any other questions for Mr. Fullerton?
So
I
how
have-
would the,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Harold.
Go ahead, Harold.
I don't want to interrupt anybody.
You're good.
I have a general comment, and then I have a couple questions, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, but if you asked me what 82% was, I think I would be able to answer you what I thought 82% was. That means, in my opinion, 8 out of 10 or 82 out of 100 answers were correct. So I guess I'm a little bit still not skeptical. I'm interested in that, but overall, what level you may have on the sheet and that you passed out, and I don't see it. How many levels do you have in your standard-based grading? Is there 4 levels? Is there 3 levels? And how do you know, is your top level meets, or is it meets or exceeds, or what's your top level that you get to?
Yeah, so to your first point on the point values, my concern not so much on a mathematical level, of course, I can know that an 82 would be 82 out of 100 or 8 out of 10. My concern is my ability to say what that means as far as learning goes. Is it 8 out of 10 facts? Is it 8 out of 10 skills? Or I just wasn't clear. Didn't think I was clearly communicating what that meant. To your question about the levels, so my counterpart, Kara Gearhart, has been working on developing a grading system that does describe things where there is a meets expectations, making progress towards expectations. I'm working on thinking about how that could work with my system yet, but I'm not quite there yet.
Okay. Because my overall question is that back to your A plus, A minus, I don't get really too technical in the plus or minus deal, but I do think one thing that I see in standard-based grading is I hear a lot about that we just meet the criteria, which I think is a valid point. You got 8 or 10 things, targets that a person needs to know over a course of 9 weeks or 18 weeks a semester. That's great that they met, 10 targets, as you might say. What my concern is that if you just tell me they met them, then are we not, if you will, marginalizing the excellence in education? And what I don't hear in standard-based grading, and maybe over the course of this year, you and others can help me understand, is where the excellence in education comes from, and how are we pushing, excellence, and not just, oh, gee, you met the criteria. So, again, I think it's great that you can target 10 targets, and I agree with you. I think that's very helpful as a parent and as a teacher to know you met these targets. I just want to know that we're more than just meeting them, that we're providing excellence in education.
Sure, that's absolutely 100% a valid concern. And I think if you look at the way that Mr. Fullerton has this set up, if we were to say that meeting expectations, realistically, we were to assign proficiency, it'd probably be around a 70%, right? So that would be the just meeting expectations. And I recognize that that's different at the elementary level, but for us, that excellence of education is going to be displayed when we go above and beyond that 70% mark. Now, you can set that proficiency level at whatever you deem to be appropriate, but in terms of levels, quote unquote, that's not really how standards-based grading practices exist in this. So it's not like we're just moving through levels. It's just trying to be very targeted with what our grades are communicating about students learning about specific skills.
I just had one question. So just to be
ahead and
clear.
identify
Oh,
again.
I'm so
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay.
Melidia Payne. Sorry.
Okay.
What was I? Oh, yes. So as you were saying with your grade book, so if a student just comes and listens to you and wants to watch YouTube or something on their Chromebook during the time and does not turn in the work, but then they do the test or you ask them the questions or whatever you say and they show you they can do it, then that's okay.
What would show in the grade book was that they had met that material. If I noticed those students' behaviors, I would, of course, be very diligent about communicating with parents as well as recording that information in Skyward. I also work very hard to make sure that the activities I'm doing in class prepare them for what I'm expecting them to do. So if I am successfully doing that, then watching YouTube videos in class or not participating will be reflected in the fact that they will ultimately not meet the learning target.
That answer your question? Yes. Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Fullerton?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So from a where are we going now situation, I can get back to the slide. So our initial plan was to implement this gradebook via learning target framework, which is, it's not all of the different standards-based practices. We weren't going to mandate some of these other practices like Mr. Fullerton referred to, the replacement of grades and some of those other pieces. We were going to start by just trying to get this framework in place. We had PD with staff in January and February, and we had quite a bit of momentum going with it. And then COVID hit, and it kind of put a halt to a lot of what we were doing. So you'll see that the timeline is kind of reflected in the new strategic plan. The intent, and again, this is of course COVID dependent, the intent is to be able to look at implementing this in some fashion by the spring, but this of course is going to be wholly dependent upon what we're able to get accomplished in this time frame for these first 18 weeks, knowing that our staff are going to have to be spending the majority, if not all of their time in PD front loading on how to teach in a pandemic. This may not be something that is a reasonable goal for us to really implement, but it's something that we're going to keep in the back of our mind and continue to push for. So,
Any questions for Mr. Stoltenberg? Thank you very
hey,
much.
thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Oh, Harold?
Yep, I do have a question. Thank you for coming tonight, because I was one of those board members 2 weeks ago, and I appreciate the other explanation. Have you looked at other districts and how we compare to other districts, and are they having success with standard-based grading?
So I can tell you, standards-based grading has been around for a long time. I myself, as an educator, as a teacher in the Blue Valley School District, utilized it pretty similarly to what Mr. Fullerton has described back when I taught over a decade ago. They've had a lot of success when it comes to looking at student achievement. I would tell you that with that said, that is certainly some of the literature and some of the research that we're looking at. I don't know that we have any nearby us that we can point to say, yes, this is it. But I think that's also part of us taking that on as part of the Gemini project, is that we were deciding that we wanted to do something, and that was the direction of, in being innovative towards our grading practices. But certainly, Harold, that is something that we're looking at for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Did you have a question? No.
Susan Moore here.
Mhm.
I'm excited by this because I'm the poster child for why this needs to be in place. I'm really good at taking tests. I've been fortunate that way. I can data dump and I don't remember a thing I tested over. So my mastery was never there, but I could test and get A's all the time. And so I'm probably the poster child for why this is very necessary.
Yeah, and I think to reiterate what Mr. Fullerton stated too, if you recognize you're in a situation where if a kid can come in and ace a test with having goofed off all the time in class, it tells us either the content is not rigorous enough, that this kid needs some kind of enrichment, or that we need something else in terms of our activities. The activities are not actually being beneficial, and so if we see those things, it allows us to differentiate for those students in that manner. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Mr.
thank you.
Stoltenberg.
Appreciate it, guys.
Appreciate it.
Right, as we finish this up, what we need to remember is that what we're voting on here is to approve the updates to the strategic plan, not necessarily anything within the strategic plan.
Great. Is there a motion to approve the updates to the strategic plan?
So move.
Second?
Okay, it was moved by Linda Alderman and seconded by Susan Moore that we approve the updates to the strategic plan. We'll go through a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes.
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie D'Andrio, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Janda Olmsted. Janda Olmsted has left the meeting. Melidia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 6-0. And we are down to a part where everybody is going to turn up their televisions at home who have patiently waited for this moment, the reopen plan.
We can now quit dilly-dallying around about other things and get to the reason why we have 400 people watching the meeting tonight. We have what we think is a great reopening plan in place, and I want to say that on March 12th, our schools were shut down by our county, and shortly thereafter they were shut down by our state. And every week since then, the expectation has been different than what it was the prior week. And if you remember back to the beginning of June, as we finished up the continual learning plan, the expectation in June was such that we probably better be, at the very beginning of June, it's, oh my God, we don't know that we're going to be able to open. If you remember the conversations that were existing at that point in time, it was, oh, we better be prepared for remote learning. Shortly thereafter, the expectation was that we open up and nearly everything became wide open, and the message to our schools was you need to find a way to open, and you need to find a way to open with everybody, and we began to see what was beginning to happen. Shortly thereafter, KSDE came out and said, yep, you need to open, but now you need to open with a remote learning plan as well. And then shortly thereafter that, they said, oh, and by the way, we'll provide guidance, but we won't provide that guidance to you until July 13th. And shortly after that, the governor came out and said, oh, and by the way, I'm going to create an executive order that says this and this and this, and I'm going to provide mandates across the way, and I'm going to do this. And every day since then has been a new day for us moving forward. So one of the things that we recognized, and if you remember in June, we provided 6 different options to our board and how we could provide a different type of learning environment. And of those 6 different options, we'd communicated them with parents, we'd talked with staff about them, we'd had a great deal of conversation about what we needed to accomplish. And as we got to this point, we began to recognize that really about 4 of those options really meshed with what we wanted to accomplish in this environment. And so we sat down with our building leadership teams, and our administrative team back here has done an amazing job in trying to take a very short amount of time and address the issues that we need to address. But as we identified those 4 options, which were that one, we provide an environment in which students can attend in person or attend remotely, and if they attend remotely, 6 through 12, it would be a virtual option. That one was heard at our last board meeting as well. The second option was that they attend completely remotely. All students attend remotely. The third option was that students who desire to attend in person, attend in person. Those that desire to attend remotely, but the in-person students attend all day. And option 4 was that those who want to attend in person would attend in an A-B model to try to make sure that we created safe environments for our kids. As we started having these conversations, what we realized is that in this situation, a one-size-fits-all model, and we heard it earlier in a different presentation today, actually I think it came from a comment from the public, that a black and white solution is not the answer in non-black and white times. And certainly a one-size-fits-all solution is probably not appropriate for what we want to accomplish. As we heard it from staff, we heard it from parents, we heard it from community members. Everybody has a differing opinion, and the one thing that comes back is do what you need to do in order to create and maintain a safe environment. So in listening to that, we developed what we would identify as our reopen plan. So if Dean would click on our reopen plan. Now, behind this is an understanding that our buildings will identify the infrastructure of the reopen plan. That what we're addressing as a board is the footprint for the reopen plan, and we address the nuts and bolts of it within buildings just like we would any other schedule. Because they're going to be different amongst buildings. Start times, stop times are different. There are lots of things that are different. Creating a blanket statement across the district doesn't behoove us. So the real question was, is our district able to balance class size in a safe environment? If the answer is yes, what we get to is what we had identified as option 3. If we have, and we'll utilize if 50% of our students want to stay home and 50% of our students want to attend in person, then our class sizes are pretty small, 11, 12 kids tops for the most part, specifically at our elementaries. We can address secondary at a different time, but still similar construct. If that's the case, then we can have very clear space within our buildings. We can modify how they maneuver between classrooms and transitions. We can do all of those things. If that is the case, and we can have small class sizes, then option 3 is in place, which is the yes bar there to the left, which states that all students who want to attend in person would attend a full day in person, very small class sizes, and any student choosing to attend remotely would attend remotely. And we would provide that instruction during the day for those students who choose to attend remotely. So in that case, when we can use enrollment to determine a safe environment based upon class size, we utilize option 3. If enrollment indicates that we have 80% of our kids that want to attend in person and only 20% that want to attend remotely, we're starting to get into class sizes that are 16, 17, 18 students, which may be more than we can handle in a safe environment and make everybody feel comfortable. At that point in time, we use what would be ultimately option 4, which is an A-B model. And in that A-B model, what we identify is that half of our students will attend in the morning, half of our students will attend in the afternoon. Remote learning is expected of those students when they're not attending, right? So if you attend in the morning, then you have a remote option, and we'll identify how remote looks here in a little bit. We have a remote option in the afternoon to make sure that you're meeting all your needs. But we have our kids in our possession during the day to make sure that we can create action in terms of their learning process specifically to the core curriculum, but all curriculum. But especially at the elementary levels, the need for our students to have learning in the foundational skills is imperative to us. Students who continue to want to not be in school in person continue to attend remotely in this model, right? So either one of those, yes or no, students who choose to attend remotely can attend remotely. But students in an A-B model, all students are going to attend remotely at some point in time, as we try to maintain a safe environment for our kids. In the event of a shutdown, we get to option 2, right? And we'll talk about what would create a shutdown here in just a little bit. But in the intent that we have to go full on remote, option 2 comes into play, and we go remote to all students. And again, we can talk about the ins and outs of that here in just a little bit, but we can still, nothing to this point has ever indicated that we wouldn't still have access to small groups and instruction. Even when we started the continual learning plan at the end of last school year, a decision of this board was that we not do small groups, right? If you remember that, the governor still indicated that we could meet in groups of less than 10 in our classrooms, but we had kind of decided, no, we're not ready for that. We don't know how it would work. In this case, I think we are ready for it, and I think we do know how it would work, and I think it's imperative that we continue to have small group instruction if we have the ability to do so and if parents feel comfortable sending their kids to our school. So even in a full remote learning situation, there are certain students that we would need to still have access to, and if we can get more than that, we would certainly do it in small groups, no greater than 10, making sure that we meet the needs. At any point in time, and we'll talk about what remote learning and the expectations of remote learning here in a little bit, but there are distinct expectations for parents who choose a remote learning environment for their child. One is that they have to engage in 6 hours of learning a day. One of the things that we need to recognize is that is very different than the continual learning process. If you remember the continual learning plan, it identified from K all the way up to 12, I think starting with K, that we shouldn't see more than 30 minutes a day of workload for those kids. Right? In a remote learning environment, the expectation is that we still meet 6 hours of learning for those kids. Now, that doesn't mean that they sit in front of a computer for 6 hours. It means that they're engaged in a learning process for 6 hours a day. That might mean that a parent is reading a book to them for 30 minutes. That would be included in a remote learning. It might mean that our PE teachers are telling kids that they need to exercise, and maybe they go on a walk with their parents for 30 minutes. That would also be included in that remote learning time, meeting the 6-hour requirements of learning. So there are lots of things that we'll have to communicate with our parents about the process, but it does not mean, I want to be very clear, it does not mean that any of our kids have to sit in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. It does mean that parents will have to sign off on a log, and here is the state recommended daily log. We're actually going to build something a little bit different. What we will create in this environment is we will have our teachers identify what the daily learning looks like for each of our kids. And we will identify the amount of time that it should take students to accomplish those tasks. So we might, in this particular case, and I'll use this one back here since you can see it, we might indicate that this is for a 4th grade class. And so we might have math and the activity, how many minutes that we expect it to take. This might be the remote learning, right? We might do in-person instruction for math, but we might say your practice is at home. Therefore, it's going to count towards your remote log. So you got 40 minutes of in-class math instruction, and we're going to do some practice at home that might take 25 minutes. I'm just throwing numbers out there. But we create that log of activity. We say, here are all the things that you need to accomplish today. And it's going to total a particular number of hours. We send it home with parents. All of this is already filled out. They don't have to do anything other than send it back to school signed. Therefore, we have a log of activity. We know what it is. We can identify what we need to understand in a remote environment is that our FTE is going to be predicated on our students meeting the remote obligation. So if a parent chooses a remote option, but in their learning log, they only identify that they're meeting 3 hours a day. So we'll use our board as an example. If Shanda meets all 6 hours a day, Shanda, when we get audited, will be a full student FTE. If Chris meets 6 hours a day, he will be a full FTE. If Linda only meets 4 hours a day, she will now be 2/3 of an FTE. If Julie only goes half a day, she'll only be half an FTE. If Melidia goes a full day, 1 FTE. So you can see how the audit process works. So we want to make sure that in that remote environment, we create a log of activities that are going to ensure that each one of our students meet their expectations every day and provide the avenue for parents to help teachers reach those obligations. Right? So in a remote environment, this is what it looks like. Even if we do an A-B model and some of those kids have to attend remotely, we still provide this for parents. We still make sure that they have everything that they need in order to achieve the success and the learning processes for their kids. If a parent doesn't want to do that and doesn't want to send their kids to school, but they are in grades 6 through 12, the virtual environment is very different. You do not have to meet the remote requirements and the daily log in a virtual setting. The virtual setting is taken care of by itself because it logs the hours for you. What you have to identify is that you have to spend 25 hours a week within your virtual system and platform, that those things are done within the system. So there's no daily log that you have to send and sign for and those things. The virtual environment takes care of itself in that capacity. So if you want to have a system in which your day is very clearly defined, your students can work at your own pace, you can finish classes as fast or as slow as you need to in that environment, everything is there for you in that digital environment, the virtual platform through the Ottawa Virtual Learning Program is ready to go. It is aligned to our curriculum. You have access to teachers when you need it. You have all of the things that you can do. It is a very succinct program that you can work through. So, Dean, if we can go back here real quick, I can't remember. There should be a. Yep. So here is an A/B schedule. Okay, and we put this up here again to identify an idea, so that you could see it. I'm not telling you that these are the exact times. There's still much to work through, but in an A/B schedule, this is what we will recommend at the building level. Monday through Friday, A/B schedule, and it will flip-flop back and forth as we need it to. But we will split students by alphabet. I say here A through L for ease. We'll actually go through and identify students A through whatever name and students whatever name through Z as we start identifying how best. We will also address families that have students of different names. Right, so we recognize that we have combined families that may have students with different names that we'll have to take into account. We'll make sure that we do that. But we will create an A/B schedule, and this one would indicate, we'll identify this as elementary. We'll show you what middle might look like, but the schedule would be the same. So group 1, A to L, comes in from 8 to 11. Group 2, which is M to Z, would then be in their remote environment, right? And that remote environment doesn't necessarily mean that they will be joining the class of A to L. They will have activities that they need to do in their remote environment that will go with the log, right? We will have a break. We'll get teachers their plan time. We'll get teachers their duty-free lunch. We'll provide students that are there in the morning lunch as they leave, students that are coming in lunch as they come in. We'll address those things in the building. Then we will have M to Z come in for the afternoon. This would give us the opportunity to make sure that our core instruction is being taught to our kids in person, which is why we're not saying that group 2 is remoting into the classroom with our kids. We find it imperative that our instruction, there has to be in-person instruction, especially in some of our core areas, to make sure that we get through there. So We'll identify how that looks within each building and make sure that we can address it. But this is what it would look like Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday, we would see a diminished time to make sure that we still have an opportunity for professional learning communities. There has probably never been a time that we need our PLCs as much as we will in this environment. Our teachers have to have the ability to collaborate. They have to have the ability to work together. They have to have the ability to bounce ideas off one another and make sure that we're doing the right things for our kids. At a high school level and the middle school level, Dean, if you look at the AM, PM, this is what it would look like in order to maintain the daily activity of our staff. So the schedule still works, and this is actually an 8-period. We would create a 7-period schedule. But you can get the notion. The highlighted areas in yellow are the times in which students are existing in person in class. So again, this is a half-day environment, same time frames as we saw in the AB schedule. What this means is that your first students, your students A through L, on Monday are coming in for periods 1 through 4. Right? They go through 1 through 4. Your group 2 is doing remote learning with those areas at that point in time. In the afternoon, group 2 is coming in for periods 5 through 8. Right? And your first group is doing remote learning. On Tuesday, your group that did 1 through 4 yesterday is doing 5 through 8 today. And your group that did 5 through 8 yesterday is doing 1 through 4. So over the course of 2 days, you get through your entire schedule. But your remote learning overcomes some of the things that you're going to miss out on a daily environment. Now, we recognize that this creates some issues. We also recognize that we're not spending as much time with our kids in person. The reality of it is that if we pile 20 kids into a classroom, we're not going to be in a classroom for very long. So we have to find some ways to make sure that we diminish class sizes, still provide in-person instruction, which we know is best, and create a safe, practical environment for our kids to be on while still meeting their learning goals. So that, if we go back to the reopen plan, Dean, that is the footprint. And that is what you're voting on tonight, which is a little bit different than what we presented last time. But there has been an incredible amount of work. Our administrators over here have put in hours and hours and hours meeting with our staff, trying to come up with a plan that we feel like is going to meet the needs of as many of our students as we possibly can. It is not going to meet everybody's needs. There's not going to be a plan out there that's going to meet everybody's needs. But this is the one that we can address within every building. We can have some flexibility within every building to meet each of our needs as we need to. And we can begin to help our parents understand what school is going to look like next year as they make a decision about enrollment. So this is the reopen plan. We will get to calendar. We will get to addressing COVID and safety and all of those things. But this is the reopen plan as we present it.
Are there any questions for Dr. Cobbs about the specific footprint open plan that we need to vote on tonight?
No, I'm not going to get into any what-ifs, because I know you guys have already done all the what-ifs, but I do know how much work you've put in on this, and this is remarkable. It's fantastic, and I'm proud of all of you for the work that you've done for this district and for the kids. Thank you so much.
Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the reopen plan presented?
I just had a couple questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
I'm sorry. Melidia Payne. I've had several people ask me, and I've sent them to you, but I don't know if they contacted you, so I'm going to go ahead and ask, because they're probably watching. Can seniors graduate early if they go with the Play-Doh option?
Yes, they've always been able to do that, but that is an option, depending on, so typically by the time we have a senior, they're 2 credits away. If they've accomplished everything that they were supposed to, they're about 2.25 credits away from meeting the 24 credit requirement. And those 2 credits will be their English 12 requirement and a combination of government and econ. So if they wanted to simply identify that those were the only 2 courses that they wanted to take, they would forego any ability to participate in anything else within the building. And once they met those requirements and said we're done, they would no longer be considered a high school student. we would push back on that and try to get them to do some other things so that we can make sure that they're continuing to access the things that schools can provide. But certainly it is an option for anybody that wants to utilize the virtual program to graduate early. That option is there and will continue to be there.
Dr. Cobbs?
Yes, sir.
Does this plan last all year, or is there an adjustment? Because I know nothing's happened week to week, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, since this is pretty fluid, is this a 9 weeks, a semester, or is this an all-year plan?
No, I think we want to make sure that we reevaluate where we're at with this plan at least every quarter. We will have lots of conversations with administrators about how things are going and if we need to make changes within the plan to meet our needs. And certainly we'll hear a great deal of feedback from parents as we move along as well as students. We want to make sure that we take those things into account and don't get to a point where we just say, nope, here it is, this is what we're doing and we're going with it. So at the very minimum, we would want to reevaluate every quarter to make sure that we're doing the right thing, communicate what that data looks like to our board and make decisions moving forward.
Very good. Another question is, so right now we're open to option 3 and 4 depending on what the enrollment is. So we're not fixing an option tonight. We're saying we'll do whatever we need to do based upon enrollment.
You're exactly right.
We are going to provide in-person education, but it may somewhat fluctuate depending on enrollment.
Yeah.
Is
So
that a fair statement?
you're exactly right. And exactly how students attend in person will be dependent upon the volume of enrollment. So if we have low volume of enrollment, parents can expect that their students would be asked to attend every day, all day. If we have a high volume of students who want to attend every day, all day, then we need to come up with a different option to maintain a safe environment for all kids there, which is when we implement the AB model. So we need to get through the enrollment process, which pending approval tonight of the plan, we would open up tomorrow. We'd make sure that parents are given enough information about what we're doing here to hopefully make some educated decisions about what they want for their child so that we can get a better understanding and a glimpse of what that enrollment will look like, and we know exactly what those schedules would be as we start school.
Last question. So I make my decision in that enrollment form, and I think I want to go one way, and I wake up a week later and realize, boy, as normal is the case, sometimes I make really dumb decisions, and I want to switch. Is there an ability to switch?
Yeah, and this is going to be the thing that I think creates some anxiety along the way for both parents and teachers. But the reality of it is that we're in an environment that nobody knows how to respond or what to respond to, and telling people that they don't have the ability to move when we're talking about needing to create a flexible environment doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The last thing that I would want to do is to create an environment where a kid was attending remotely and we knew that they weren't engaging remotely and we knew that they were struggling remotely, but we were going to tell them that for the next 9 weeks, that's the way they have to learn, and we just continue to create gaps in their learning. So we want to make sure that we communicate with parents. If they have a change of heart, we need to be able to address their change of heart. I think where you will see pushback from us is if 1 week they want to do it this way, next week they don't, next week they do it different, and we start having this flip-flop. We'll probably have some conversations about how that needs to work. But if something is not working, we want to make sure that we address that with our parents and provide the best opportunity for our kids.
Well, thank you for working so hard. I think this is a good model rolling forward, given the uncertainty of the times and enrollment and things like that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, you had more questions.
I did. So I think you did a good job explaining the AV and all that. So could you, or maybe I just didn't hear it, just for the student or the parents who want their kids just to be remote?
Yes.
Do you have another presentation on that, or did I
No.
miss
So
this?
remote is going to look a little bit different for those that, and it'll be dependent upon which level they're at. But at the elementaries, what we're going to have some conversations about is, do we have enough students that are learning remotely that we can just identify a singular teacher to say, here's our remote instructor for second graders? Maybe it's just second graders at Sunflower, maybe it's second graders across the district, depending on how that is. If that's the case, then that teacher will be the remote instructor for those students, and they will have a time span for those kids to be enrolled in their classes. Now, there will be some consistency in terms of how we deal with them and how we deal with our other remote learners, and that, again, nobody wants a third grade student to sit on a computer for 6 hours a day. So there will be times that we get on and off of the platform, and then there will be modules that we provide to parents through that process that says, here are some things that you're going to have to do in the evenings or whenever to help that kid get to the point where we have their 6 hours of engaged learning time. But the remote environment looks the same. The difference will be whether or not the teacher is a singular teacher or whether we're talking about a district-wide teacher for a remote environment. But that's where we'll get to when some of our teachers have issues that may not allow them to engage in the same manner that they would in a normal year. We might utilize them in a remote environment. But those are things that we're going to leave in the hands of our buildings to address. But the remote environment will have a specific teacher, expected outcomes every day. That teacher will be engaging those kids in a virtual platform through Google Hangouts, Big Blue Button. We can talk about those things. But every day there will be expected timeframes and expectations for those students with teachers.
And then if at some point the entire district had to be virtual, it would?
Yep, we'll transition through that. And that would be the way that everybody would learn at that point.
Okay, but tonight we're not voting on the option 2, I think it was, that was all
So
virtual?
it's embedded in this. So the only thing that you see here, all students who attend, and it didn't show up over there, so I apologize. Every parent has the option to have a remote learning environment. So in all of this, you still have a remote option.
Even in the,
Yep. Regardless of whether it's yes or no, or we go full schedule or A/B schedule, embedded in that is a remote option for all parents. So if parents choose not to send their kids to school, it's embedded in here. It is a part of their learning option. We'll provide a remote environment for them. So if we go A/B, you'll have full remote students, and then you'll kind of have like half remote students, because some of them will be attending in person, some will be full remote. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
Dr. Cobbs, what, on the AB model, if we have parents at work, are we going to be offering, because that's going to get into some busing issues and stuff, so we get maybe B model to school, so are we going to have to be running like maybe double
Yep,
busing?
we're going to have to increase transportation.
Okay.
There's no doubt about it. We'll probably have to provide more in-town routes than we've done before.
Right.
We'll have to work through that, and I know that Frida's going to do an amazing job of making sure that we can get our kids to and from. But I don't think that we can run a model like this and expect parents to be solely responsible to get their kids to and from. We will ask a lot of our parents in this environment, but for those that can't, we will find a more rigorous transportation process, even if it means that we have different pickup spots where kids can gather and then we get them to school where they need to. But we'll figure that out.
And can you explain again, I think some people, I've gotten a couple of messages, we're not expecting, when parents, we know some of them work, we're not expecting them to have that kid engaged online all day when they're in whatever option it may be on, I can't remember if it was A and B. It was the one where we had like A and PM where they flip-flopped, where they may be remote half the day or whatever, and they flip on that schedule, that we understand that it's hard to hold.
So the remote environment for kids that are attending in person will be available. It will be predominantly work expectations for them from the process that they utilized within the day. Now, there may be some things that we get from our specials teachers that engage them in that environment. There will be a lot of different things that occur there. To say that there won't be a time during the workday that we won't have kids that are expected to get online is false. We will expect kids to be online during the school day for a couple of reasons. One, the contractual obligations of our teachers are not readily moved around to say this one is going to go from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and this one's going from 12 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and this one's going from 7:30 to 4:30. The contractual obligation of our teacher will predominantly remain the same, which means the instructional practices or the instructional times for our students will still remain within that normal school day. If there are issues, just like we do with everything else, just like when we have kids that are struggling, they call their teachers at 6 o'clock at night, the vast majority of our teachers will engage that student and parents in a conversation to try to make sure that we provide the best thing for our kids. But it is going to be very difficult for us to create a situation in which teachers are teaching in the evening to make it easier for parents.
And I'll say lastly, kudos to everyone and even fellow board members. This is uncharted times for all of us. I know I use the cliche all the time. There's no Amazon book for dummies for us to go figure this out. And I know no one in this room takes any of these decisions lightly, and that we're all truly trying to make the best decisions with what information we have at the time. And by 7 a.m. tomorrow, we know that could be taken away and we have to start over again. So kudos to everyone.
Any other questions for Dr. Cobb?
Thank you. I just want to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing here. The roadmap is a remote option for all parents. K through 12, if they want to learn remotely, they have that option. If they want their students to attend in person, one of two things is going to happen based upon enrollment. Either class sizes are small enough that all kids will attend every day for the full day, or we move to an A-B schedule for those kids plus remote learning on the backside. And if students want to attend virtually 6 through 12, they have that option as well. If we get to a point where we have to have a shutdown, we go full on remote. This is why it's not a one-size-fits-all model. All 4 of those options that we identified are laid within this plan to try to provide every avenue for parents to make the best choice for learning that we can for their kids,
Well done.
with a lot of work from teachers.
I know.
Would somebody like to make a motion to accept? this
Madam
plan?
President,
Yes, Harold?
I move we accept this proposal, and I to applaud the administration and the staff and building level teams coming together with this plan. So I'm excited to make the motion.
Second.
Okay, I think she beat you by
I
a
think
little
she
bit. It was moved by Harold Wingert and seconded by Linda Alderman that we accept this reopen plan. We'll do a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes.
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie Dandrio, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Shanda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. And thank you, everyone, for the incredible amount of work that you put into this. And this is an amazing thing that you've done, being able to put all 4 options in there and making it something for everyone. It's really great to see. We are moving on to section 6.03, which is the COVID response. So this was something from Franklin
So
County.
we're going to look at the COVID response before we looked at contact tracing. So the question that I probably get asked even more than if we're going to have school and what school is going to look like is what happens when there's a positive case of COVID within the system. And this has been a question that we've been looking for an answer to from the beginning. And I will tell you that I feel blessed to have the relationships with Franklin County and certainly with the county health officer that I do, because I get to have real conversations about what this looks like, and not periphery conversations. But when we start trying to identify what is going to happen, one of the things that we heard, again, through multiple parent interactions with us tonight, was that we can't just shut down schools just because. We have to find a way to, 1, maintain a safe environment, and 2, continue that environment in the face of a number of different issues. So this actually provides some course of response for us and how we address what happens when certain things happen. So currently we are in stage 1. We are in prevention. So health prevention measures are in place: daily intensive cleaning, limited visitor access, monitoring virus trends. We're doing all of those things. So again, a couple of questions that we can reiterate from the board comments were, what are the safety precautions that are going to be in place? So First and foremost, we're working under a mask mandate right now, so we can recognize and understand that at least as we start the school year, every student pre-K through 12 will be expected to wear a mask. There are health exemptions there. If you have them, you just need to let us know. We can address those things. But we have purchased masks, we have purchased face shields, whatever is the best modality for our students to feel comfortable and safe in that environment, we can make sure that we have it. I've provided masks and cloth masks and like a sublimated mask for staff so that our sunflower teachers have a falcon on theirs, and our cyclone teachers, or our high school teachers, have a cyclone on theirs. So we've made sure that we have some things. The mandate also requires that we have hand disinfectant every hour. So every classroom has been equipped with a hand sanitizer station, a hands-free hand sanitizer station. You just put your hand under, and we can go through, make sure that we have that ready for them. All of our water fountains, I maybe shouldn't say all. There will be water fountains in every building that have been transitioned to bottle fountains, whether retrofitted to do that or completely replaced with bottle fountains. Any normal water fountain will be shut off so that we don't deal with the issues with water fountains as we know exist. We have all of the furniture will be cleared out of our classroom that is not essential furniture. So we can make sure that our classrooms, as much as I hate to say it, will be a pretty static environment. But part of that is to make sure that we provide a safe environment for our kids that is going to be as easily disinfected every day as it can be. The reason that you utilize an A/B schedule and we have some time in between there is that gives us an opportunity to have custodians and our staff come in and disinfect as we need to. We'll make sure that students have the ability and that teachers have the ability to constantly spray down their desks and disinfect desks and do those types of things. So there are a number of precautions that are in place. We have touchless thermometers throughout all of the buildings. Again, another of the mandates is that every student has to have their temperature taken prior to entering the building. We will have a way for that to occur. We will know what is going to happen. When we have a student who has a temperature, they will have a room in which they can go to that is an environment that would not have just a bunch of kids hanging around in it. So it's secluded, so we can make sure that we're not spreading any of the germs or anything that may exist with those students. So we know that there are lots of things that we have to have in place in order to be at stage one, and those things are in place. We have them ready to go. We are ready to go. If one or more cases is confirmed in a specific area in a classroom, you can see that there are 4 steps that we would come into play. One, anybody who is coming in close contact with that individual will be contacted and advised to follow KDHE health guidelines. The affected area will be closed for deep cleaning. That does not necessarily mean that it will be closed for long periods of time. One of the things that our board did purchase for us was an atomizer disinfector. They will be in every building, so we can move straight to that classroom, completely disinfected in a very short amount of time, and get it back going again as quickly as possible, and still having a semblance of that environment being safe and clean and ready for the next group of kids. There's going to be an expectation for self-health monitoring and prevention information. Stay at home if ill communication to all persons in the facility. If you are feeling sick in any way, shape, or form, don't come to school. I know that the next question is about truancy. We're going to tell you that if you are sick, don't come to school. We're not going to turn somebody in as truant if they're sick in this environment. The way that truancy comes into play is you're just not engaging in class. And if we have to have a short-term closure of specific areas, especially playgrounds, gyms, athletic fields, those things might be necessary, but again, they would be short-term in their closure. If we get to stage 3, in which we have confirmed cases in a specific area, in which those confirmed cases reach 10%. Again, this is a number that's out there that'll be different if we only have 8 kids in a class, 10% becomes 1 student. And so that's not necessarily the way that'll work. But again, that's a part of what happens with fluid guidelines. But we will recognize that as we see more than a student in classrooms, when we get to 2 and 3 and 4, we go to the next stage, which is stage 3. And again, there are increased numbers there, some of them the same as what we saw in stage 2 with additional stages of support. If we see a facility that gets to 10% of our kids, that's when we start seeing that we may have a closure of facility. So again, this is where the flexibility of the learning plan comes back into place. Just because this might be happening at Garfield doesn't mean that district-wide we have to shut all buildings down. It means that maybe all of our Garfield students become remote learners for a short period of time, while we make sure that the building is safe for any students to be able to go back to, and that we make sure that it's clean. We communicate with parents about what's going on. We provide information to make sure that they have access to the health department as they need to. All of those things would be included in that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because we have an issue at Garfield that all of our students or all of our buildings have to address the issues of Garfield. Not to just pick on Garfield, it's the first building that came to mind. If we get to 10% of our district, that's where we start looking at closure of the entire district and a shutdown. Now, this is now a public document, so if parents want to see what each one of those bullet points states, they can get on board docs, they can look at it. It will also be provided to them. It is not yet approved by the county completely. They're still doing some updates, but I did tell them that I would share it with you and that it would become public knowledge. I think it's important for our community to know that there is a set of steps in place for us to address how we deal with COVID-19 and any type of outbreak or even an initial positive case taking place in a classroom and what our response is going to be. So as that is approved by the county at what would probably be the next county commission, we'll make sure that we share the final document with all of our staff and all of our parents.
I just had one question.
Sure.
I know the county commissioners decided not to vote on making a less stringent mask requirement
Yep.
at that time of their meeting. If they do decide to take a vote on that, then in the school district, if we're having the small classes, the AB, then it would be up to the parents to choose whether they want their kids to wear the mask or.
Yeah, it would still come back to us at that point in time. So currently, we're under the mandate. If the county chooses not to uphold that mandate, what I understand at this point is that the Attorney General has indicated that yes, they may have that option, but legal counsel on the other side has basically told them we wouldn't do that if we were you, is in essence the information that I've received. They may have gotten something since the last time we talked. But if that is the case and they choose to diminish that, one, we would have some conversations with the county health officer, say, what do we need to do in our schools and what is our problem? We would then bring it back to the school board to make a decision about where they want it to be. So we could do more than what the county indicated that they wanted to do, or we could accept what the county was going to do and move forward from there. But it would be a school board decision to do so.
Thank you.
That's all I got. We just need to.
Did you want to go over contact tracing, or do you want to?
Oh, yeah, contact tracing, I forgot. So the second piece of this is that, and again, this goes back to the safety of it. Part of that plan will be that the schools will have to assist in contact tracing. And so part of that means that we're going to have to train several of our staff members in every building to learn how to do this. So this is kind of the outline of what is expected and what we need to do there. We will identify most likely the nurse in each of our buildings, as well as one of our other staff members, most likely not a teacher, because we don't want to pull them out of a situation which they're instructing to go through the contact tracing. But we'll make sure that we have at least 2 staff members in every building that are trained to be able to do this, just in case one happens to be gone at a time when we have to address it. We'll provide that to them prior to any students coming into our building. So this is a web-based training that we can go to, and we'll make sure that we provide it to our staff, make sure that we're ready once students come in to help our county health department, should we have to go down this path.
Thank you, Dr. Cobbs. Any questions for Dr. Cobbs about this before we take action tonight?
Just if you have somebody at home because they're in quarantine, maybe they have sick family or something like that, they can do contact tracing remotely.
Yep.
Would be an option for something for them to do.
Anything else? Would somebody like to make a motion to accept the response,
So moved.
COVID response?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, so it has been moved by Chris Cunningham and seconded by Susan Moore that we approve the COVID response developed in partnership with Franklin County. We will go through a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes?
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie Dandrio, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Janda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. And we are down to 6.04, which is the calendar change.
All right, so there are really 4 options that we will discuss here. The first is that we do nothing and we leave the calendar that's currently in place. The second would be that we create a full-on remote environment and we determine what the start date is in a full-on remote environment, which you've already approved the reopen plan, so it's not really an option anymore. So I'll go back to you have 3 options. Option 1 is that we don't do anything with our calendar. We start as it currently states that we start. The second option would be the one that you see in front of you right now, which would be that we start on August 24th and end school at its normal time. The third option would be that we start on September 9th and we end on May 28th with teachers' last day being June 1st. Now, I want to make sure that we understand that in all of this, I have not built the calendar around the start date and end date as we normally would. So what I'm showing you in the calendar is simply what we're voting on tonight, which would be the start date of the school year and the current end date of the school year. What happens in between will be a discussion with myself and OEA to finish the calendar, to make sure that it is more succinct, that we maneuver PD where we might need to be able to provide a better latitude. But I think what everybody wants to know is, when is school going to start? So I provided a calendar, not to say here's what our school calendar is going to be, but you can get a glimpse of what it would look like and where the professional development would start and what the end of the school year looks like. I know that there was great discussion across the state when the governor indicated that maybe we should start on September 9th. That there would be a waiver process in place again, and that those days would just be waived out of the calendar. The reality of it is that that's not what is in place, and that schools are still expected to meet their 1,116-hour requirements. So if we push our start date back, we must push our end date back, which is why you see the September 9th date now have an ending date of May 28th. So I would give you some background on why the different options might be beneficial. So one, I don't think that the original calendar of starting on August 7th and having kids back in the building on August 13th is even a remotely sane option for us. It is an option, and it's one that we can review, but we are not prepared to start at that point in time. Our teachers, our buildings are ready. I think we can have safe environments for kids. What we don't know yet is what our enrollment is really going to look like, so the plan doesn't come into great effect. And 2, our teachers are not prepared to teach remotely. I know that there are some people that would identify that we've had all summer to prepare for this, but we need to remember that teachers have not been on contract. We can't call them in, and we can't have this opportunity to work through these things in the same manner that we would once they come back on their contract. So we probably need at least 2 weeks of professional development time to make sure that they can understand how to work in a remote environment and address the needs of a COVID-19 environment, because it is different than anything that they have ever done before. This is not continual learning. This is not, hey, let's put a bunch of packets together and give them to kids. This is true learning that needs to address the needs of each of our kids individually, still personalizing learning, making sure that we address those needs at a vast period of time during the day, and that we're accessible to our students when we need to be accessible to them. So it is a very different environment than what we saw at the end of last year, and there's a great deal of training that needs to exist there. If you think about it, teachers who have not engaged in digital instruction in the past, asking them to be prepared and ready to do so is a pretty tall task, especially if you're talking to teachers who have 4, 5, 6 preps in a day. It is a difficult task, and we need to make sure that they have the time to do it. So therefore, we really need to identify the two different options. If you look at the first calendar that has them starting on the 24th, there are still 2 weeks of PD available to our staff. We can do so. The issue with this calendar in terms of the reopening plan that we just approved is that it still only gives us a very short amount of time to address the enrollment process. So if we open up enrollment tomorrow and we have even 2 weeks of enrollment, we've only got 2 weeks to address the schedules of kids and try to identify which teacher's teaching what, all the while we're trying to apply PD and all of the things that are going on within that environment. It makes for a very hectic beginning of the year, and one that doesn't lend itself to a very smooth transition. If you look at the September 9th calendar, again, it gives us a clear 2 weeks after we would stop enrollment for us to begin to address how that scheduling looks like, how we communicate with parents about what the expectations of their students are, and gives us an extra day of PD in order to prepare as we bring kids back on the 9th. So one of the questions that was asked to us about PD. So on a normal day, if I can remember my math right, at middle school and high school, we have 410 minutes of instruction that takes place on any day. On a PD day, we have just about what we can identify as just a little over half of that. So over the course of the week, if we have 5 PD days, we only lose 2 student contact days. So we currently have about 10 days built into our schedule for snow days because of some rescheduling things that we did. They give us some latitude for a 1,116-hour requirement. So we really go way over. We get almost to 1,200 hours, which is a huge benefit to our district. So by adding the extra PD days and the extra planning, we don't necessarily need to add student contact days to make sure that we get to the 1,116 hours. We can plan appropriately, make sure that our staff is prepared for dealing with our kids, and not have to add additional contract days to meet the 1,116 hours. So I want to make sure that as much as we've talked about meeting the state mandate and some difficulties that come up in adding PD days, that in this particular situation, we can do so, that we can add those PD days. Yes, in total, we lose 5 student contact days. That's a reality, and that doesn't make anybody happy. But in losing those student contact days, in terms of the state mandate, we only lose 2, and we're much better prepared to deal with instruction with our kids in the grand scheme of things.
And so that's why the semester still ends before Christmas.
So that's a piece that I would tell you is going to change.
Is going to.
Yes, there's a great likelihood that when we have this conversation that we will transition how we deal with the semesters.
Okay.
Because currently this would put the end of the first quarter taking place after, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, which limits some opportunities. It may very well be the case that we still leave it at the end of December. But I want to make sure that we have some of those conversations with our staff, that it's not just the calendar itself we can fix in the next week and have ready for the board to approve at the first meeting in August, in terms of this is exactly what the calendar is going to look like. But I wanted to make sure that we could put our start date out there and our end date so that we can address those things, and we'll fill in the gaps of the calendar as we need to.
But if we delay, then either the semester will end after Christmas break, or the first semester will be shorter than the second, which both is what you've said you don't
Yes.
want and what the teachers don't want.
Yes. None of those are good things in a typical year. In a COVID environment and in a pandemic, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't say on a normal year would be great for educational purposes.
Dr. Cobbs, this is Julie D'Andrea. What have teachers and OEA and your leadership teams, what are they telling you as far as what their preference is for start date? Do they need the extra time?
Yeah.
Do they not? And what are
So
they saying?
any way you look at it, they need additional professional development time. I think that they've indicated that 2 weeks is a must. And I wouldn't disagree with that. There are some things that we'll have to do. Our current negotiated agreement identifies that we can't have more than 5 days of professional development prior to students and teachers returning. So we would have to have an MOU there. But in meeting with Megan O'Neill and meeting with our teachers, I think the vast majority of them indicate that they need to have more professional development. So I don't see an MOU as being a real issue in terms of our negotiated agreement. I think you've received as many comments as I have about where our teachers stand with this. When we met with building leadership teams and our principal staff came back to me at the end of the last week, I think you again saw my response to the board about trying to listen to them and the anxiety that exists there and wanting to make sure that they are prepared for this environment, and knowing tonight we'll go leaps and bounds to making sure that our staff is prepared, knowing that there's a plan in place, knowing that we have an environment that is going to be safe, knowing when we're going to start and when we're going to end, is a huge benefit to our staff to be able to begin thinking about how they provide instruction in this environment, and allows them to begin to plan for such things. And I know that all of our administrators back there, I would imagine, will be meeting with their BLTs this week once a plan is finalized to determine exactly how that's going to look and what enrollment is going to look like. But I think from a staff standpoint, it's overwhelming that I think a September 9th date is where they would like to be. I've not heard much in the way of anybody that would complain about extending the school year to still meet their requirements, although there are some complaints about that. But there are complaints on all sides of this, and we have to weigh those as much as we have to weigh the other things. So certainly going until the end of May is something different than our district has done in the past, but that's something that we would have to overcome.
Well, I know all my teacher contact people are really wanting the September 9th start date, and they wrote, as did I, to our state board representative, asking them to vote for that when they had the chance.
I think our parents, the ones that I've heard from, I think the vast, I shouldn't say the vast majority, the majority of them have indicated that a date further back they feel is appropriate. I think more than anything out of anxiety that they hadn't seen a plan yet and they didn't know what to do. So again, hopefully what tonight brings is some clarity to what the next steps are. I don't know that there's a right answer. What I do know is that you began to see Johnson County schools make decisions, and I shouldn't say Johnson County, certainly Wyandotte County schools. You saw Turner, Bonner, KCK, all of them in that group make decisions about remote learning and starting at a later date today. We've seen other districts indicate that they're only going remote learning. There are lots of things beginning to happen based upon the unknown. I think it's important for us to make sure that our staff is prepared. And I think the best way we do that is to make sure they have enough time to prepare and that we have enough time to understand what our enrollment process is going to be. But I also think that that we have to make sure that the environment that we create for our students is the most beneficial for them. I am concerned that if we have to do solely remote learning for K1 and 2 in very foundational years for our kids in terms of molding the building blocks for their learning, that we wind up with situations in which students have to struggle for years because of a pandemic that didn't allow us to do particular things. That's something that we have to weigh in this, which means it is vitally important for us to create a safe environment, to make sure that our buildings are clean, to put all the processes in place that we can to ensure that our kids are safe when they come through the door, because it is imperative that we do in-person learning as long as we can. I don't think any of our administrators would disagree with me. We've had this conversations multiple times, but I also don't think that any of our staff would disagree with that. What I do know is that if we can't provide that environment, if where our kids come is not safe, that it's a detriment for them to be there, and we put people at risk, which is also not where our district wants to be. So in terms of making a decision tonight, this board is going to be tasked with the decision of when do we want to start. Both options, starting on the 24th or starting on the 9th, give us about 2 weeks of time to prepare. I guess the question that this board will have to answer is, will we be better prepared on September 9th than we will be on August 24th? And do we give our staff enough latitude to make sure that they come to work prepared?
Your first recommendation, you said that you recommended starting earlier so that we would get a better start before reaching the cold and flu season, when you were concerned about us having to shut down so we could have more in-person time.
Yep.
What changed about that?
So lots of conversations with parents and staff about what those anxieties and what we were prepared to accomplish would be. So the initial reopen plan was very clear. Come to school or don't come to school. Use virtual school if you can. The new model that we presented needs to have some flexibility and time frame for us to be able to create the scheduling for us to persist in that environment. So additional time frame would certainly help us there. But as we talk to staff and begin to understand that we have to overcome some anxiety and trepidation, and that we really need to sit down and have real conversations about what that looks like, and they have to have some time to prepare for what this looks like. I mean, think about if we were making a decision tonight to start on our normal calendar, our teachers would be back next Friday. That's not much time. And so they have to mentally prepare themselves for what's coming and for an environment that they've never taught in before. So that's what changed, if you ask. I think I need to make sure that my job as a superintendent is to provide the best I can for our staff. And when my staff reaches out to me and indicates that I need to listen to their needs, and that when we look at that, we can still provide great instruction for our kids over the course of time, I think I have to listen and at least present that to the board to make a decision.
Okay, and then what happens to all the events, like the athletic events that will be scheduled between August 13th and September 9th that were scheduled?
Yeah, so part of that is going to be determined by what some of those other districts that we just talked about choose to do. So I don't think we have a recommendation ready for our board to make a decision about what's happening with athletics yet. There are lots of conversations we need to have with our league, and we need to wait and see how many of them also chose this. I think Tonganoxie was meeting tonight. I think there were 4 or 5 other districts that were meeting tonight having the same conversations about start time. DeSoto was one of them. So as we know more about what those start times are, I would imagine that our league is going to get together and identify, here's what we need to do as a league. And maybe what that means is we begin to modify what our athletic schedule is to just meet league events. Maybe, I don't know, but I know that conversation needs to exist. We would like, again, to have that conversation in place prior to our next August meeting to make sure that we know exactly what's going to happen with athletics one way or the other.
Because
Dr.
like
Gump?
Susan said earlier, the mental health of the kids.
Yep.
What I keep hearing from parents is they just need their kids back involved and socializing,
Yep.
and the mental health has really been suffering. So I'm concerned about missing more.
Yeah, I certainly
Thanks.
understand that, absolutely.
Thank you for answering the sports part of it, but we have a lot of other clubs and organizations and is it just sports related? I guess my question is, are they, not that they follow a different calendar, but are those same discussions yet to be had about if you're in FBLA, FFA, other organizations that typically would have other events going on
Yeah.
before September 9th?
I wish that I had the answers. What I would tell you is that after EO 2058 came out and then was denied by or overturned by the school board, our team and the staff that we've utilized, our building leadership teams, have been solely focused on developing a reopening plan and making sure that we can provide the right plan for our students to attend from an academic function. Once we have this in place, we will turn our attention to what we're going to do with athletics, what we're going to do with activities, all of the ancillary items, how transportation is going to exist, how food service is going to exist, how we deal with all of the other environments that occur within the school day. We will make sure that we have those things in place. But our focus for the last week and a half has been solely how in the heck are we going to create a safe environment and a plan for schools. So we will address those things. They will be coming. We'll make sure that we have a plan in place for the next board meeting.
Lydia, I really agree with you that the kids need one another. They really do. They're suffering right now. But if you look at where we are today and the 2 weeks, which is really only 10 days, those first 2 weeks in August, that's a very short time to get the enrollment and everybody sorted out.
A couple of things will happen, and none of this would change. So, and high school can stop me here if I'm wrong. Our last activities take place next week, our last camps and stuff. We'll get through those, but the weight room ends this week. Conditioning, for the most part, ends this week. So I think we have basketball camp and volleyball camp next week. And once that happens, nothing would start again until school was going to start. So we have that week there to begin to identify how this is going to happen. We will have, I'm sure that Sean will be on the phone, and probably Kyle as well will be on the phone with all of our league schools and our affiliates to see what their decisions are going to be with athletics. Athletics is a very difficult conversation, and activities as well. I won't identify it just as athletics because it's important on both sides. We have to be consistent across the board because ultimately what might happen is that if we say no, we're not having athletics, and a neighboring district says yes, we are, then we put parents in a situation where they have to talk about mobility because it's important to them to participate. So we want to make sure that we provide the right solution. And that we are consistent across the board in what we're doing, and that we make sure that the opportunities that exist for our students are, one, safe and applicable to what we can do, and two, that we continue to be at the forefront of opportunities for our kids when we can be.
Dr. Cobbs, I was going to let them know about the Neosho Community College as well. So just something that I keep getting asked a lot by our parents is about our Neosho Community College courses. So I met with the representatives from Neosho Community College today to talk about our potential delay in our start. A lot of schools, as you know, across the state are doing that. They would work with us. Our students would not be asked to extend the semester beyond whatever we decide it is. We will have enough seat time and enough learning hours, regardless of if we go with the 24th or the September 9th start date. The only piece to that is if it's a course that takes place on Neosho Community College's campus, like our CNA, our CMA courses, welding or electrical courses, those high school students might have to start going there on the 24th for some like remote learning, but the classes wouldn't start taking place face-to-face until we got to where our calendar is. So I felt like I wanted you all to know that, because I get asked that question, and Mrs. Tharp gets asked that question almost daily by our students and their parents.
So those students would have a piece they would start with?
Some of them would, if they are a CNA student, a CMA student, welding or electrical student, they would have a piece that would start on the 24th. If they're not, if they're taking like our English comp, our psych college psych class, calculus, any of those are taking place in our building, and those wouldn't start until we start school.
So just to add to that, the welding courses take place in our building as well.
Yeah.
What they're indicating is that they're not going to meet in our building. But they may have remote learning that would take place outside of that to meet their requirements starting on August 24th, but our students wouldn't start meeting in person until we could meet back in our building
Yes.
on those dates. So if it's our dual credit courses taught by us, none of that exists, right? So so the reason that welding is different is because we don't have the instructor for welding. We don't have the instructor for electricians, or we don't have instructors for CNA, CMA. Comp 1 and Comp 2, those are our instructors. They work under our time frame. Therefore, they are differently applied through Neosho County than the other courses are.
Any other questions or discussion before we ask for a motion? All right, would somebody like to make a motion for calendar start?
Madam President, I move that we have a start time for kids on September 9th and that the teachers come back on August 21st.
Second.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Linda Alderman and seconded first by Chris Cunningham that we do a start date of September 9th for students with teacher return on August 21st. We'll do a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes.
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie Dandrio, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Shanda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
No.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 6-1. And we are down to hotspots, 6.
Okay, I'm going to bring
6.05.
Dean up here with me, and this is one of the things that you heard in that Spark conversation. So in a remote environment, we have some kids who are not going to have access to internet. The Sprint hotspots that we have currently are for high school students alone. Verizon at times seems to have a better web that they cast in terms of actual providing service. So we reached out to Verizon to see if we could provide hotspots. What I'm asking for tonight is that you give us the latitude to spend just under $24,000 that would be 6 months of service on devices. Now, that doesn't mean that we will spend that much on devices. If parents don't need them, we're not charged for them, at least in that initial 6 months. So if we only use 50 of them, then we only get charged for the 50, so it would cut that in half. But because it's over $20,000, I want to make sure that our board approves this. I do think that it is important for us to be able to provide an option for families that don't have access to internet. Now, we'll work through the ins and outs of how we acquire these things. I think it's also important that we may have to offset some of that cost at times, but again, those will be things that we work through. But this is, and Dean wants to talk about hotspots a little bit. He can add to that if you have any questions for what we're trying to accomplish
The only
here.
thing I would add is that we have 100 of them reserved for us, and that's about all they can muster up. The ones that they gave us, that Sprint gave us last year for the Sprint 1 million project, they are a lesser, I wouldn't say lesser quality, but they are a different branded device that we're not used to seeing. So Verizon has 100 reserved for us. We told them we don't know how many we need yet, but they said 100 is as much as we can give you, take it or leave it. The suspended billing option does allow us to get them for free, 100% free, and then have them off for up to 6 months in a year. And that can be 2 months here, 2 months there, 2 months there, but 6 months total, they can be off, but then they have to be activated or completely taken off of our contract. So the number we gave you is 6 months of service. If we put the full 9 months of service on it, if that's what we see, it'll be higher than that, obviously. But we just wanted to give you that 6 months would be the bare minimum that we would have to have those 100 devices on throughout the school.
And Chris Cunningham, we may not even spend that amount. There's that
Right,
that
it may be
chance.
zero. What I will tell you is that at the high school, at least, we had a hard time giving out 50 hotspots. I understand that was a normal school year. It's completely different now,
Yeah.
but we will provide these as we can. This does not necessarily cover the high school. We still have 23 brand-new devices for the high school from the Sprint 1 million project that are completely free. Again, I think we'll dip into those as well at the high school eventually.
So the other side of this that we need to consider is, one, we need to be prepared for what's happening now. What is coming is that there is a statewide push to use COVID relief dollars to provide an infrastructure across the state for all students in a remote environment. So in essence, they create like a utility that would be available to everybody. So we'll see how that comes to fruition. It is a part of the conversation, but until that occurs, we need to make sure that we have some things available to our kids.
Thank you.
Dr.
Is there a
Cobbs?
motion? Go ahead.
Maybe you
Madam
already said
President.
it, but did you say that that's something we could possibly recover from Spark or some of our,
Yeah. So I will ask for these dollars to be given back to us through Spark
Okay.
funds.
thank you.
Yes, Harold?
Madam President, Harold Wingert, I wholeheartedly support this and appreciate Dean's and the admin's effort for this. So I move that we approve this motion.
Thank you,
Second.
Harold. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. Did you say second?
It's
Okay.
fine.
All
It
right.
doesn't matter.
So it's been
We're just
moved by
seconding.
Harold Wingert and seconded by Susan Moore that we accept the approval for hotspots. We'll do a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes?
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie Dandrio, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Shanda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert.
Yes.
And that passes 7-0. Thank
So
you.
within this agenda item, there was another conversation about devices that I wanted to bring up because it was brought up at the last time. It would be a separate action item. But there was maybe some clarification that needed to occur in terms of what we're doing with devices, as the old Toshiba devices apparently create some consternation amongst board members. So one of the things that we can tell you is that, one, when the devices that we have ordered get to us, there will be no more Toshibas in the rotation for any student. They would be completely out of the rotation. Currently, where those Toshibas are at is that they have been touched. John Horn has touched every single one of them, cleaned every single one of them, replaced any missing parts or anything that was broken on them, made sure cameras worked, make sure that they all work at the appropriate speed, and they should be a quality device for our kids until our new devices get here. I know that there was some question as to whether or not we wanted to order more devices. If that's something we want to do, then the company that we just purchased our recent Chromebooks from has indicated that they would give us the same price to order more. The question is that do we just, once the new devices sit here or get here, new devices are just going to sit? So the question is, if we want more devices, we can order more devices. We can use Spark dollars to order them. We can use COVID relief funds to order them. We can use whatever we need to order them. It's really a decision for this board to make as to whether or not we want to order more devices and have them accessible.
But we don't need them.
Well, what devices are you giving to the 4th and 5th graders that are having the Toshibas?
So that would be when the 450 devices we just ordered arrive, then those devices will go to 6th and 9th.
Right.
6th and 9th currently will have devices that will come out of the rotation, and those will be our Dell 3120s and Dell 3180s.
And are those end-of-life devices like the Toshibas?
Nope. Toshibas are the only end-of-life device that we have currently.
So had we not approved to buy new devices, the 6th and 9th graders would have still just used those and everything would have been fine?
We would have had not enough, well, we would have had Toshibas.
We would have purchased new devices one way or the other. It was part of the rotation to purchase those devices. But the devices that we currently have in the hands of those that would rotate down would be rotating down to replace the old devices. That's a part of the way that the process works. So we buy new devices for certain grade levels that are going to push them through the next 4 years, and we rotate the others down.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. When we had the middle school, at the end of the year last year, we had the 8th graders keep their devices over the summer as opposed to turning them in. Typically, our 8th graders turn in their devices, they go somewhere else. So at the end of the year last year, we didn't know what we'd have at the beginning of this year. So we asked them to keep those devices, they took them home, and they're going to roll those into their freshman year, which we would then replace with our new devices when those showed up. So because now we have new devices on the way, and they're a little further behind than we expected, when those do show up, we give them to our 6th and 9th graders, the new devices, reclaim their old devices, and then put those back in the elementary schools and get rid of the Toshibas. So it's kind of a stair-step effect to get the Toshibas out the door.
So will we be needing to buy new devices then again for next year?
Yes, we buy new devices every year.
So should we just go ahead and order them now in case we're seeing even a further delay at a later time?
That's a decision for the board, I believe. We'd have to get more. I'd have to talk to Insight about how many we could purchase at that price, but I don't see what issue they would have with selling the stuff.
Because I would hate for us to be in the same situation or a worse situation next year if other schools don't have their orders in and it just keeps getting further and further behind, I guess is my only concern.
Dean? Oh, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Chris
Go
Cunningham.
ahead, Chris.
And maybe you can answer this, Dr. Cobbs, but I think we get to where we have CARES money and Sparks money and everything else that, one, I don't want to say that we cut ourselves short and not leave it there for staffing issues and stuff that may arise, because the unknown is scary at this time, but I think I'll echo what Melidia said. If we have a chance to purchase them, we know technology does not get cheaper, and we have this Sparks money or whatever that we can earmark to spend on this, then my opinion is that we look at purchasing additional devices.
Dean, what is your recommendation? I mean, you're in charge of all this. Oh, sorry, Harold, go ahead. I overstepped you, please.
Okay. Okay, so I guess my thought on this is I kind of echo the past two comments, or piggyback, I think is what I should be saying is, yes, we have devices potentially that would be available. Please run over, burn, destroy the Toshibas as soon as you get new devices in. But those devices that we would pass down still are, potentially 3 or 4 year old devices. Whereas we have an opportunity now to get new devices. And I guess my thought is everything we've talked about in this district, our core values is we provide robust education, we're a Gemini education, we're providing 4 options for education, including remote, in-person, online, virtual, you name it. I think our devices are going to be used more than ever. And I agree, we got some money available for it. If there was ever a year that I'd buy more devices and have the newest available on out to our students, this is the year, in my opinion.
Harold, I agree. Quality devices are kind of a priority for us. But the big thing to keep in mind is that any purchase we make today, we'll have to remake in 5 or 6 years, unless they're on a replacement cycle. Our big push is to get that 5th grade on this replacement cycle and then get our 1st grade on the replacement cycle so they step up 4 years at a time. That's where we're trying to get, and without COVID, we would have been there this year. But COVID kind of throws a stick in the spokes. And what I don't want to do is if we put devices in, right now, let's say we buy 200, 400 more devices, we're going to have 200 devices that are perfectly capable of being used that will then sit on the shelf because they will not be used anywhere else. I don't want current tech just sitting around creating technical debt for us that's not being used, not in the classroom, not in staff setting. I want to make sure that all of our devices are being used, but at the same time I understand that if we want to have quality devices for everyone, the Toshibas have to go.
And they will
but
go,
one
right?
thing you could easily do is your seniors are sitting there with older devices, right? And they're potentially high volume, high data, doing multiple things. So you could potentially swap out 3 and 4 year old devices with new devices, which would enable more robust learning. Is that correct?
Yes, if they had brand new devices.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is we don't have to necessarily sit there and let new devices sit. We could rotate out older devices and put newer devices in hands of people that needed it, especially if we're talking about some of our student population, 100% of their education will be remote. And so my thought is get the best devices in, get them in the hands of people that need it. And then, yes, next year we'll worry about rotation as we get post-COVID.
I guess the one last thing I would bring up is that we allow our high school students and our middle school students to defer repairs until they graduate or until they progress to their next device. If we have a student that cracks the corner of their Chromebook and it's an aesthetic damage and not an actual functional damage, we don't want them repairing that just to have them fix it next year as well, that same component. So what I'm getting at here is if we do have a senior switch out devices, we're going to have to tally that all up and during a pandemic ask for money from our stakeholders, which may not be probably in the best interest, and I'm sure we could talk about that more.
So, Dean, to go back to my question, this is Julie Dandrio. What is, you have a system here, right? I mean, you are in charge of this tech department and have things rolling well. So I want to know, what is your thought? Do you think we should spend and have extras? Do we need them? Or is it something that you think we're in a good place where we are and we should just continue on with our current rotation schedule?
I think back to the beginning of the conversation, if we get our 450 devices that are on the way, and we put those back into the hands of our 6th and 9th as we planned, then we take those 6th and 9th devices, which are 3 and 4 years old, as Harold mentioned, and put those back into our elementary schools. We have devices that last, that will work just fine. If you look at our teacher devices, we have teachers that choose the Toshibas. They prefer them because of the larger screen. They are not extremely slow. They're not much slower. They're not noticeably slower than our current devices. The Acers you have in front of you are now 3 years old, 3 years old. They're not a slow device. Our Toshibas, yeah, they have some age on them, but they still work. And they can get us through from now to December, where we can sweep them out with brand new devices at middle school and high school and bring those 3-year-old devices back down. I think it's not fiscally responsible for me to say, let's get all brand new devices, mainly because in 4 years, we'll have to buy all brand new devices again, and we may not have those Spark and COVID dollars to do that.
Thank you.
Chris, oh, go ahead.
Dean Shandall Olmsted, what about the devices our teachers have? Could they use new devices?
I think everyone would love new devices. We have something in this district we like to call Chromebook envy. Every time someone gets new devices, specifically in, like, let's say the middle school gets new devices, the high school goes, hey, let's get new devices too. Those are neat. Those are touchscreen. That was the big push this year, and last year was the touchscreen devices. Now everyone wants the touchscreen devices. Our staff could certainly use new devices. We see staff that have, and again, the trick is making everybody happy, because we have staff that love their Toshibas. There's not a lot of them, but they love their giant screen on their Toshibas. And we came to the high school, gave them all brand new Dell 3180s 2 years ago, and we had like 5 or 6 teachers come back and say, no, I want my Toshiba back. Give me my Toshiba back. I think if you give a teacher a new device, yeah, they're going to be happy. But again, I'm not certain that a lot of our teachers, actually I know for a fact, a lot of our teachers don't use their Chromebooks, because we have metrics on that and we track that information. I don't have a count for you, but I know we have a lot that are just sitting around. And it may make sense for us to, I'd have to run the numbers, but get rid of the Toshibas right now, and then pull some of those staff devices back that are not being used. I don't know how many there are, but there's quite a few. Additionally, in the numbers that we gave you, those were only devices that we could put our hands on. And I know that some of our elementary schools, they sent devices home over the summer as well, just to keep them in households. I don't know what brands they were, I don't know anything about them, but we have that information in reporting if we had to pull that out.
Because I personally have, my child has one of the Toshibas, and she's trying to do the summer math, and when we started the continual learning, it was working okay, and now then anytime she tries to watch Mr. Carlson's lesson, it freezes up, and the other day she was like, Mom, I can't even get this to restart, So when we get the new devices in that you're going to trade out with the 4th and 5th graders, then will all elementary students have touchscreen?
No. The 6th and 9th grade devices right now are not touchscreen.
So what we would be ordering if we decided tonight to order new ones, then the elementary students would have touchscreens?
If we order in a substantial quantity, that would cover the entire, all those grades, yes.
Okay. I think that our students, we're setting them up for using these devices more than they've ever used. And I think that it would make sense to give them those and then also be prepared for if it would arise next year that the delay is even worse, like this summer. And then we wouldn't be able to get the new devices that we would need next year. I think that it would put us ahead to go ahead and get those ordered.
What would the delivery date be if we added more? I know that's the million-dollar question, I'm sorry, but...
So we had information to us today that says that delivery dates that are not already currently set have been pushed back 6+ weeks. The federal government has banned some companies. I don't want to get too deep into that right now. I can send you all the news articles, but they are companies that are providing components that are inside Dell, Apple, all the way up to GM, that are being impacted by this sanction, we'll call it. They are being federally banned from being purchased anywhere on this side of the ocean. So probably 6+ weeks is what we're looking at. We have an email to Dell to confirm if Chromebooks are specifically affected. Right now, we know HP, Acer, there's a lot of them that are out there that are affected, but Dell is listed, but they have not confirmed yet. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I know that there are things beyond anyone's control that are making it to where we are 6+ weeks out past our current date, which is Christmas.
And the only reason I brought it up earlier on spending Sparks money or whatever is I was just looking at, that's a way to not directly impact our budget when there, as Melodia said, there's a need that is arising to use our computers way more than we ever have. So I wasn't questioning your plan that you have figured out, and I understand that when those start hitting their cycle, then all of a sudden we have a large amount that we're trying to replace instead of what you already have set up. So I understand where you're coming from too. I'm just trying to make a decision financially what makes the most sense.
And the only way to get off of those set cycles is to replace equipment that doesn't need to be replaced, which then is
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
Yeah, I understand.
Are we taking action on this tonight, Dr. Cobbs?
That's up to the board, yes. I mean,
mean,
if
if
there's a
we-
motion there, then certainly we have the
Okay,
opportunity to take it.
okay. Does anyone else have any?
I'll make a, Madam President.
I'm not, Harold, just a minute. Susan, did you want to say
Oh,
something?
that's all right.
Did I hear you?
I guess I would like to give some consideration, again, an overall plan. If you said there were employees that may have ones that they could, that are sitting there that you could move around.
Yeah.
Things like that. I guess for me, it worries me with one-time monies. You all know that's one of my things that sits in the pit of my stomach. I also want to make sure we've got money that we can pay the teachers to come early and do all the extra stuff we're going to have to ask them to do, you know, so that can come out of that money too. We saw staff salaries and things.
So one of the things that
not
we
just
can do
technology.
is that if we're going to wind up waiting 6 weeks anyways, we don't know that we'll be approved for Sparks dollars as of yet. I can certainly put it into the proposal. We'll know from the county fairly quickly whether or not, and we could come back at the next meeting and make a decision as to whether or not we want to order Chromebooks and know that we would have that through Sparks dollars or not. We can find out whether or not that can take place, and we can move from there. Then we can have an identifier of exactly how many devices we would need, which ones we have available, and we can make a better decision about how much money we would want to spend, if that's acceptable to the
I
board.
would feel much more comfortable with having a little more data on what our needs are and what the costs are, and then maybe even with Terry looking at that extended budget down the road, if that's going to put us in a pinch when we have to repurchase, since this is one-time money.
Dr. Cobbs, Chris Cunningham, I had a question to make sure I'm understanding this right. So when we get reimbursed on some of that through Sparks, in my mind, that makes part of our CARES money we got that kind of starts making it flush back to where we almost started, right?
Yes.
Because we're getting paid back for something we already used that came out of our COVID money.
Right.
And the county's paying us back out of their COVID.
So there are a couple of things that we don't know yet, because we have to identify other funds that came to us. The request from county Sparks dollars, if the group looks at our funds and says, well, you already had these COVID funds that you haven't used yet, and there's more requests than dollars available at the county, they may very well say, you need to utilize your COVID relief funds before you access Spark funds. That's my concern with just saying, yep, let's approve this because we can use Spark funds. But again, I have to submit my recommendation to the county by the 29th. We can make sure that we add enough dollars in there to address devices. They should get back to us pretty quickly about whether or not that's approved, and then we can come back and identify exactly how many devices we would need and how we would want to utilize that out of Sparks dollars. Or if the county says, nope, sorry, you get no funds, then we address it in a different manner.
Dean,
Harold?
I have a question. If we delay ordering tonight, does it delay delivery?
Certainly. And Dr. Cobbs did say the 6 weeks. I want to reiterate, that's 6 weeks from our current delivery date, which is Christmas. So we're Christmas plus 6 weeks today. Tomorrow, we're Christmas plus 6 weeks from that day. And with the uncertainties that we keep hearing about, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I will also once again reiterate that We don't know if the 6 weeks is even applicable to Dell at this point. It may be that they are not sourcing product from these companies and that their Christmas ship date is still their Christmas ship date. But if we put in an order today, we're just offset by the number of days from the last time we ordered after Christmas, if I worded that properly. Unless they're.
Right, well, I understand in one sense word, I like the idea of having a plan, but in the last month or two, I've approved $2 million for a football and track and another $125,000 for dirt stabilization. And if there's anything I'm going to approve, it would certainly be to increase the likelihood that we have the best devices, the highest robust online education we can. So I guess what my thought is that I'm in favor of saying yes to devices tonight and allowing, just like we said on the Verizon, you figure out how to pay for it. But I think we ought to say yes to devices tonight and not delay, 2 or 3 weeks of getting more devices. But I'll leave that up to further discussion.
Is there any more discussion, or would somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to get the discussion, Madam President, Harold Winger, I make a motion that we buy new devices and leave it up to the district to figure out how we pay for it, whether it's through Sparks money, COVID money, or out of capital funds. But I make a motion we buy new devices.
Would you like to specify a number or a money amount, or we need to be a little bit more specific? What?
Well, you used the word 200 devices earlier. I don't know if you were just using, but would you tell me what do we need to complete a grade level or grade levels?
I don't have numbers in front of me, but what I will tell you is that we typically plan for about 220 to 240 has covered most of our grade levels. And as I look around the room to administrators, 220 for a grade level, is that plenty?
You have about 180 kids per grade level right now.
So about 180 kids per grade level, Dr. Cobb says.
Okay. And I just did a quick math, 200 devices at $250 a device. I don't know what they really run, at about $50,000. Is that a fair, I know we're just talking ballpark numbers, but is that a fair assumption?
I think, how many devices, we paid $150,000 for, how many devices did we buy last?
450.
For 450 devices.
Okay. So 450 divide by,
And we don't need the money, Harold, and the number, just something more specific. So if we know about how many or what you were thinking for your motion.
yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to figure out is, maybe that's a challenge, is that we don't have a proposal in front of us tonight like you did the Verizon. So, I suppose maybe we ought to amend to come back to the next meeting. My fear is if it's the 6 weeks apply and then we apply 3 weeks to the next meeting, we're mid-March, right? And we have a portion of our student body on remote learning. We've also said we may take devices away from teachers. I just think that is the wrong angle. So I don't know what the right answer is. I guess I'm struggling to figure out what the right answer is.
I do want to clarify, we don't intend to take a device away from teachers. Teachers all have 2 devices assigned to them, their Chromebook and their desktop. We have data that shows that the Chromebooks, dozens of them, have not turned on for a long time. So every time a Chromebook turns on, whether it's yours, whether it's mine, whether it's a teacher's, we get information when that device turns on.
Okay.
We have lots that have not turned on. So we're going to take idle devices back, not actively used devices. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
So could we
Okay,
just
thank you
maybe
for clarifying
say
that.
like a 240, is that what you said, to cover the grades?
That was my data for like 1 grade, and that was
For
our
one.
large grade of the
Freshman.
I think. But
And then you could just take whatever you find from the teachers or computers.
If you wanted to identify a certain number, we could certainly do that.
So if
Madam
we said
President.
that, like if you said 240 or 250, and then you would subtract the devices, the idle devices, you could just,
Your motion at that point would need to say up to 250 devices and give us some
that'd
latitude
be
there.
1 grade level.
Yep.
So if we were wanting to hit everybody, or if we were wanting to just get rid of the Toshibas, our end goal would be accomplished when we get our 450 in December anyway. Toshibas would be gone, and we'd have everyone on a current device. That's the oldest one would be 4 years at the tops, which would still have 2 years of usable life, and at that point, they'd be replaced on their regular cycle the next year and then the following year.
That would be if we did nothing.
If we did nothing and just waited for our devices that we have ordered to show up, correct?
Would anybody like to make a motion?
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to give Dean and Dr. Cobbs time to put something together for us for the first meeting in August.
Okay. All right, it's been moved by Chris Cunningham and seconded by Susan Moore that we come back at our next meeting with a proposal for purchase technology for additional Chromebooks. We'll do a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes.
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie D'Andrea, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Chanda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. Thank you.
I will make sure that we get information about this in the update. You'll get it prior to, so that way you have some information prior to our next board meeting. But we'll make sure that we're well informed of what we need to do to accomplish that task.
We are moving on to section 6.06, which is the second read of the handbooks. We've all been presented with this before, so I don't know if there's a whole lot to discuss
No.
or represent.
There's not a whole lot. If Dean just clicks on the personnel handbook changes, those are the only changes. So,
Motion, we approve these handbooks.
thank
For
you.
a second.
Second.
Been moved by Susan Moore and seconded by Chris Cunningham that we approve the handbook changes. We'll do a roll call vote. Linda Alderman,
Yes, except I wish we would have read them word by word. I mean, the way it's going now, why not 11?
Why not?
Chris Cunningham,
Yes.
Julie D'Andrea, yes. Susan Moore,
Yes.
Chanda Olmsted,
Yes.
Lydia Payne,
Yes.
Harold Wingert,
Yes.
and that passes 7-0. And we are down to the personnel report. You've all been presented a personnel report. Is there a motion to accept said report?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Chris Cunningham, seconded by Susan Moore, that we accept tonight's personnel report. Linda Alderman?
Yes.
Chris Cunningham?
Yes.
Julie D'Andrea, yes. Susan Moore?
Yes.
Chanda Olmsted?
Yes.
Lydia Payne?
Yes.
Harold Wingert?
Yes.
And that passes 7-0. And we are down to announcements.
All right, I'm not going to belabor this. I think everybody's ready to go home, but I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of our teachers that have worked with us over the past couple weeks to develop a great plan. Thanks for our board members for listening and identifying what they think is best for our students and staff. Certainly our parents for giving their input and being a part of the conversation, and our administrators back here for all the work that they have done and will continue to do to create a great environment for our kids in uncharted times. So thank you to everybody. We appreciate it a great deal. I know that it's been a long board meeting, but I think we took some serious steps in the right direction to making everybody feel much better about school coming up in the next 2 months. So thank you all.
Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. It passes 7-0. Thank you.